like it. You want a podcast like it? Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. Just podcast like it. Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. You want a podcast like it's 1999.
Hello and welcome to Podcast Like It's 2009. A podcast for one-off podcast where we talk about a film from 2009 that you, our Patreon subscribers, voted for here from a cookout in 2021. I'm one of your hosts, Ken Nybart.
And I'm Phil Liskov.
And with us today is the you know, one of the great podcast guests of all time, the podcast host, Griffin Newman, who beat some really strong contenders to show up here today. But I do think the allure of Griffin plus a Fast and the Furious movie is too much, because when are you ever going to hear Griffin talk about Fast and Furious?
It never happens.
It never happens.
It never happens. And also, I want to make it clear, not only did I beat some strong contenders, past favorites of your listeners for this episode to happen, I also beat the threat of a chronic liver illness to be here today.
Yes, true.
There were several reschedulings while I waited to be told that I'm not gonna die. So I'm on the mend. Take that,
Clay Keller.
F9 has come out in theaters. The movies are back.
They are back.
It's a perfect time to talk about Ampersand, as I like to call this movie.
And obviously, Griffin, we're very happy that things seem to be good with your medical situation,
and the box office,
and the box office is back.
Are back.
It was a Lin-Manuel Miranda problem, not an American box office problem.
That was it was a little bit dicey there for a moment. It was like, is this just on LMM, or is this a medium wide issue, but a robust 70 million domestic, not just the biggest opening weekend since the pandemic, but do you guys know this? The biggest opening weekend since the Rise of Skywalker.
That's pretty crazy.
So that's even the 3 months between that and the pandemic.
So
go ahead.
I want to focus this conversation
on the $70 million.
Those of you who haven't listened to Griffin and David's John Singleton series, obviously listen to the whole thing, but they do a great episode on Too Fast, Too Furious with John Gabris.
And then I've done 3 Fast and Furious episodes of Gabris's podcast, High and Mighty, and I'm about to go back for a 4th time to do F9 with him.
So you've done 7, 8, Hobbs and Shaw, and you're about to do 9.
Correct.
Or 6,
7, 8, Hobbs and Shaw, 2, 4. I mean, this is the thing. The order in which I've done the Fast and Furious movie across different podcasts is very similar to the chronology of this franchise.
Justin Lin would be proud. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Right. So I've never talked about 1 or Tokyo Drift or 6 anywhere. I've done 7, 8 Hobbs and Shaw on High and Mighty. I've done Too Fast on Blank Check. And then this is now doing Ampersand on podcasts like it's 1999.
Just real fast, what I want to do is I want to talk about Ampersand, obviously.
Right.
And I also want to talk about the franchise as a whole, at large.
Yeah.
And because Phil and I are relatively new to this franchise, right? I only became a super fan this morning. So
you have a black Toretto work shirt, which is canon, but it's kind of secondary to the light blue Toretto.
That's right. You got the San Diego Chargers baby blue,
right?
Lance Alston going on, and I'm sitting here with my lame ass.
But it's not the hero shirt.
Anybody can pick up a black one at any in time in the city.
No.
I got this because my history with Fast and Furious is that during the pandemic, I was looking for something to watch with my 9-year-old son who's seen every movie. So we ran the series.
Yeah.
He became very obsessed.
Yeah.
He became obsessed with Paul Walker, which, became kind of a rough for us.
Problem.
Wow. Yeah.
And we wound up going as Brian and Dom on Halloween. So that's how this came into my life.
Okay.
Does he have a favorite? Does Rollins have a favorite Fast and Furious movie? I'm curious.
Favorite? Well, look, he's a 9-year-old boy.
Sure.
And the first one he saw was Hobbs and Shaw. and Hobbs and Shaw is his favorite.
Sure.
Okay. I don't have that against him. That's
after that. We just saw 9 in the theater, and he was crazy about that. And I think his next favorite is the first one. So who knows what this kid is up to?
Who knows? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know what's the thing I really? And look, this is gonna be a very focused conversation.
100%. Yeah, very focused.
Kenny has a heart out. But I think I've been thinking about a lot because it is the season, right? We're in Fast and Furious season. The new movies just come out, but it also means that there's a lot being written about it. There's a lot being discussed. A lot of podcasts are revisiting these movies or one of these movies or whatever. There's just sort of like the reevaluation that happens, I feel like, anytime one of these movies come out. And one of the things I love about these movies is that they very much feel like a living text. In that I find when I rewatch them, my rankings constantly change.
Interesting.
And it's not just because of where I'm at, but I think it also has to do with as things change in the industry at large, and also this weird piecemeal, like organic mythology that they build out of dirt means that sometimes a piece comes in at 9 that retroactively makes 4 better. You know, like there's this constant like push and pull of it.
Yeah.
But the other thing I want to say to this end is I really think that Fast and Furious has to be the least toxic fandom in existence now.
That's interesting.
I'm trying to hold back from my hyperbolic argument, which is it the only purely non-toxic fandom? But I think I could comfortably say it's the least toxic fandom because people are very passionate, are very invested, and you have different silos of different people who appreciate it in different ways, different types of fans, people who've been there since the beginning, who have a very earnest investment, people who enjoy it in a kind of ironic postmodern way, who came on late, who have just binged it in the last year like you, Kenny. But I don't feel like there's any gatekeeping. I truly do not feel like there's ever that kind of territorial attitude. And I also think I have found that like every Fast and Furious fan respects every other Fast and Furious fan's ranking. Like people can feel very strongly about like this is the worst one and this is the best one, but it never becomes like fuck your mom, I'm gonna piss on your grave.
You did just prove that by respecting Rollins' ranking.
But that's my point. Like I fundamentally disagree with that, but I'm not gonna tell your son he's wrong. Because I do think these movies, like there's such a wide variety of what they encompass at this point, tonally, narratively, genre, all this sort of shit. So it's like to some degree, it's like, what's the thing in this franchise you like the most? I can't tell you you're wrong.
So you're hitting on a lot of stuff I do want to talk about.
Yeah, because this is the turnkey movie. I mean, that's
this is the movie. Yeah.
So it's and you know, I think I've seen one a ton of times, right? Because that came out when I was in high school, and that meant something to me, right?
It was a culturally impactful movie. That movie made a really big splash when it came out.
Yeah. And it was a good movie and a cool movie, and it felt right at that moment. That moment when you were, you know, I was a junior in high school, and
I was 13, I think. I was 12 or 13, but similar, right? Like, oh, this seems like a cool adult world.
But also, like, nothing that we're going to be following any further. This is a one-off.
Absolutely
this is a movie, right? And it's a movie, and we can rent it at Blockbuster, and then the movie with the silly title comes out, and everyone's a little embarrassed about that you even like the first movie because of the silly title.
It's a huge hit. Everyone goes to see it. Everyone dislikes it. Like, I feel like it's a movie that has an almost immediate bad reputation, despite the fact that it like outgrosses the first one. And it's shown by just how much fucking the industry has changed. Universal's like, okay, I guess like we got to take the L and downsize to like a $30 million movie with no proven stars.
Which was super embarrassing. But
embarrassing.
I remember that.
But that was like an era where you just would go like, I guess we give up and we just accept that this is like a C-tier franchise now.
But both the meta narrative you're talking about, as well as, you know, putting out Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift was an embarrassing move for the franchise. In that it brought it to this like this direct to video space.
Absolutely.
Even though it wasn't a direct to video movie, but it seems like a direct to video movie.
And this almost becomes a direct to video movie. Like that was
one we're talking about.
The coin toss. I mean, not this script as it exists, right? But a
fourth Fast and Furious movie.
Post Tokyo Drift was: do we go fast direct to video, or do we do one final movie with the original cast? And even with the original cast, it was maybe we just make this a big budget direct to video thing. Like it was that liminal.
So I remember when the ad for this film came on during the Super Bowl. The first time, and it's funny because you're smiling, and I had that same.
I was going to bring this up if you didn't bring it up, because I feel like the moment I first saw the ad for this movie is very important for me.
I agree with you, because I think I watched the game with my dad, and what was so weird about that moment was it unlocked something in me I didn't know existed.
Thank you.
It was how much I loved these four people together.
You're taking the words out of my mouth.
And again, and again, Griff, I feel great about this whole thing right now, but these are not four people, with the exception of Jordana Brewster a little bit, because I love The Faculty. But these are not four people that I had any love for.
Correct. I thought I had
their own.
No fondness for these actors, these characters, or this franchise. I saw one in theaters. It worked for me. I will say, as I've said many times on Blank Check, my mom dropped my brother and I off at the movie theater. It's the week before we both got shipped off to summer camp. It's like, here's the last movie you get to see in theaters for the summer. What do you want to see? I put all fucking chips down on Dr. Dolittle 2, and my little brother won the argument with Fast and Furious. And I went, why am I going to go see this car shit, right? I walk out, I go, that was better than I thought. Right, I don't love it. I'm not like in the tank, but I was
This is one.
Yeah, right? I was like, that's pretty entertaining. Vin Diesel, pretty undeniable. I think we all walked out of that first one. You go like, I've never seen anyone like this guy before. His name's Vin Diesel. He sounds like that. That's an interesting movie star. He runs his goodwill into the ground pretty quickly after that. Most of Paul Walker's immediate follow-ups, not good. Too Fast, Too Furious, skipped in theaters. I just went like, if Vin's not in this, I don't really care. This just looks like Car Cops 2. Like, not what I need out of this.
But what's a hit?
Was a hit.
What was a hit?
But it felt like, and this is a hard thing about watching these Fast and Furious movies now, it was the worst of the 90s. It was the worst of MTV. It was, and not that the movie's bad. In retrospect, it's almost tame.
In retrospect, I think there's a lot that works in it. But I think fundamentally, the script for that movie sucks. And absolutely feels like they took a Miami Vice script and just did one pass to work in one of the pre-existing characters from this hit movie. Like, it feels like that kind of like Simon Says, like, fuck, we need another John McClane movie. What if John McClane's in this spec script we bought?
Right.
My favorite movie.
Can I ask a question, though? This ad, the Super Bowl ad that you guys are referring to, I don't remember. So can you, what was in it?
Phil, I'm teeing up.
Sorry.
Tokyo Drift I see in theaters, but it was very much a friend and I want to go see a movie, go to the theater, what's playing, I guess we could go see this. I was not enthusiastic about it. That was fun. Like, that was fun. But I don't think I have any investment in this franchise.
Me and my friends wouldn't have been caught dead.
Absolutely.
In the Tokyo Drift Theater.
Now, my distinct memory is going to see, I want to say, Death Race. I don't know if this is a false memory because it's a different car movie. But I remember seeing this teaser in the theaters for the first time. And the teaser is, it's a strategy I always love in movie marketing, which is build your trailer around just one sequence. Immerse us in a thing and go like, ooh, that's a good taste. I want to stay in that river, right? So the teaser trailer, as I remember it, is just the opening gas heist sequence from this movie, but they cut around it so you weren't seeing actor faces. So you're just dropped into this thing without dialogue, just kind of clean car heist action, right? And then I remember there being the reveal of Letty turns around, it's Michelle Rodriguez, reverse shot, it's Vin in the car looking at her. And then there's maybe like 5 seconds of quick cuts of other shots or not. The only thing I remember definitively is it goes like Diesel, Walker, Brewster, Rodriguez, and then says, Fast & Furious, new model, original parts. And I get goosebumps just saying that out loud. But it's exactly what you're talking about, Kenny, where I went, new model original parts. Why do I care? Like, it immediately got to me. I knew the movie was happening. I had heard it. I went, great, okay, go make your fourth fucking movie. I don't give a shit. The second that, the shot reverse shot of the two of them back where they belong in this franchise, Rodriguez and Diesel, right, who really are the temperature setters for what these movies are.
Mm-hmm.
And then that fucking tagline, I was like, you're right, I guess this is important.
That's how it felt. And then the other little stroke of genius that people, so these titles kind of, I think you've spoken about this, that how brilliant all these titles
Every single title is, you know, in comedy you talk about games, right? You try to isolate the game and identify a really clear game that you can play over and over again. David S. Pumpkins, he's going to introduce some new weird fact about himself and the people in the elevator are confused. The game of the Fast and Furious titles is that every title has a different game. The game is that there's no game, that they cannot stick to any sort of pattern for how these sequel titles go.
Which is great.
Which is like part of the chaotic beauty of this whole thing.
God, and you really do start to get the feeling.
Because even that moment when that title comes up in the teaser trailer, Fast & Furious, you just go, you can't fucking do that.
That's what I'm getting at.
I'm in.
That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at.
Because I remember it being titled like Untitled Fast and Furious 4, and I was like, okay, I feel like that teaser was the first time I saw that title, and I simultaneously was outraged and amped.
I was, and I'll tell you, I think you're giving I believe that you were amped.
Yeah.
I think you're almost giving amped too much credit.
I was not like
gobsmacked.
I was not like Phantom Menace amped, but I was like, fuck, I guess I'm gonna go see that.
Gobsmacked. That to me was the most revolutionary part about it, was fucking dropping the articles and calling it Fast and Furious.
Is that legal?
Believe they were just like, I can't believe they're fucking just calling the new Suicide Squad the Suicide Squad.
Yes.
But also, like, it's been done. Like, I know what you're doing.
Now it's the fucking Wolverine. Like, it's been done.
Yeah, I know you motherfuckers are doing now.
This was 2009. This makes no fucking sense. And it's also one of those things where out loud, it is so hard to differentiate between which title you're talking about.
Which I appreciate you bringing ampersand into the Let's Gun. I don't like stealing it from you, but it is the right thing.
It is the right name.
Ampersands to share. I've been trying to make that catch on for years. But I was even looking, I dug through my steelbooks of the series to rewatch this movie today. And I'd forgotten on the steelbook packaging, I don't know if this is on all of the packaging for this movie, but on the steelbook packaging at least, for this film, they title it Fast & Furious 4.
Really?
But the discs aren't titled that way. And I don't think the main release is titled that way, which is another element of this, which is like...
No one ran that by Vin.
Clearly not.
Oh, clearly not. But I just think the Universal Home Marketing Department was like, we can't do that. People won't know which one they're buying. If they go to a movie theater, they can say Fast and Furious at the ticket booth, and they're not accidentally going to buy a ticket for a movie that came out 9 months ago. Or 9 years ago, rather. If you go to Best Buy, you need to know which disc you're buying, especially when it has the exact same cast above the title.
So when I bought the 8 movie collection 2 weeks ago to watch all of these films, having not seen them really. And
was Hobbs and Shaw not included in that?
Hobbs and Shaw was not included in that set.
Vin gets his way again.
There you go. So what happened was I got the digital copies. I put the whole thing into and each one of the things in my iTunes library has a number at the bottom so that there isn't any confusion as to what. But in my library, in terms of like where they fit alphabetically, it's all over the fucking place. It's just a disaster.
It's a disaster. It's a disaster. Because once again, the first movie has the definite articles. It is fully spelled out. A title that now feels like, you know, things to do in Denver when you're dead. It feels so wordy. You go, they took the time to spell out
Once Upon a Time in the West.
Fast and
I know.
Furious.
It's quaint.
Too Fast, Too Furious, which is one of the great, like, shitty sequel title joke, Electric Boogaloo. Like, another one where you go, you can't do that, right?
No.
Tutus. What are you talking about?
All these things. So that's another reason why Tokyo Drift's kind of lame, because it makes sense. Not the movie, the title. It's a terrible title, but because it makes sense. It makes perfect sense. Tells you what it is.
But once again, that sets up a new game, which many franchises have done, which is, At a certain point, you drop the numbers and you just go to first title, subtitle.
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
They go to The Fast and the Furious, Tokyo Drift. You go, okay, I got it.
That's a lot of words. Yeah.
You found your lane.
But then don't they get into trickiness with 6 and 7? Because aren't they both Furious? It's Furious 6 and Furious 7?
Fast and Furious.
Yes. So this movie is Fast & Furious 6. Fast & Furious, right?
Right. Done. Yes.
Right. Then 5 is Fast 5. Just totally spelled out.
Great name. Great name. Great name. Great movie.
But another one where I remember people being like, they're not called Fast. You can't call it Fast 5.
That one was just, that was cool.
I was in the tank. I just remember some people questioning it.
If I had to say the one that I think is just like the worst, it's Fast and Furious 6. They mailed that one in.
I agree. So Lynn very much wanted that one to be called Furious 6. And I think
Furious 7
he was going to walk away at that point, and it was going to be Fast 5, Furious 6. And at the opening credits of Fast & Furious 6, it does say Furious 6. But Universal would not approve the title. So he got it in there in the credits of the movie. I don't remember if it's the end credits, the opening credits, or both. But he gets it in at least once visually on screen. They would not let that on the marketing materials. They would not let that on the packaging. As you said, iTunes and everything, it has not stuck as any kind of live, die, repeat retitling, right? So then Furious 7 is Furious 7, but it's numeral 7.
Right.
Sure.
Then,
because Fast 5 is the word 5. That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
And then Fate of the Furious is kind of, it's a great title.
I love it.
Very okay with that one.
Yeah. And then you just go to F9.
No,
but what I love is it's another one where there's a question, because on all marketing materials it has been F9 : the Fast Saga, which I love.
Saga.
In the credits of the movie, it's only F9. But I'm like, put in a new subtitle.
I'm super into in the 9th installment / 10th installment.
Yeah.
God, just giving the saga a name.
Yeah. We need something to tie this all together.
Not what I would have called it.
No, it's crazy. And now, so the interviews he's been doing recently.
Can't believe we just did 20 minutes on this.
Yeah, I was just going to say on titles.
You have to. Originally, Vin said he was done after 10, right? That he signed up for 8, 9, 10. Yep. And then after the mixed response to 8 and Justin Lin agreeing to come back, he was sort of like, I need 3 more to finish it up. So then it was like, okay, 10 would have been a clean one to end off at. And there are a lot of clean final title possibilities there. Fast 10 Your Seatbelts is the joke one that I stand behind. So you go Fast X Furious, right?
Right.
Any number of good, clean final sort of titles there. So then you go 11, well, it's part of the chaos of this franchise to not end with the good final number, to go one extra one. But then Vin's been doing these interviews saying we're in active pre-production. We start filming in January, and interviewers will say on 10, and he goes on 10 part 1 and part 2. Oh, so he's no longer calling them 10 and 11. He's saying we're back-to-back shooting 2 movies. That's the 2-part 10. Which boggles the mind what you could even call that. That's where I'm starting to get really excited. Because if he calls it Fast 10 1 and Fast 10 2, that's beautiful. But also if he calls one Fast and he calls one Furious, that's beautiful. If he calls one Fast X and one Furious X, that's beautiful. There's all sorts of things he could do here.
I'll say this too. They're filming one big movie and they're splitting it in 2. Is that what they're saying? Okay.
That's what it sounds like.
Which is what they wanted.
Correct.
4 and 5 to be, correct?
Yes.
The plan was to shoot both of those together, and then Universal got cold feet and was like, let's just see how 4 does.
I've heard a lot of conflicting stories on this. This is the best I can understand it. And these stories get conflicted because Vin is a fabulist. And I say this with all love. But Vin always likes to talk about how he changed everything and did things that no one had ever done in Hollywood before, and how he made every single decision in this franchise.
True fact.
Right.
I do not question him as the ultimate author of this franchise. But
he did finally join the PGA, though. I saw Fast 9. He has the PGA at the end of his thing.
It was brutal. Last year, I don't know if you guys were following on Instagram, Vin was waging a full-out war with the PGA, or as he liked to call them, the Prejudice Guild of America. Because they were prejudiced against him being the producer. But there was a junior Universal exec who went viral maybe 6 or 7 months ago.
Mm-hmm.
Franklin Leonard, I believe, had a tweet that was like, someday someone's going to write the oral history of how Fast and Furious became a franchise, and it's going to be this amazing time capsule of this 20-year period of Hollywood filmmaking, how everything changed. And in a period where Hollywood became so franchise obsessed, and this was the opposite, where it was like, this thing gets built retroactively rather than sort of planned out, mapped out years in advance by, high-level executives. But this one executive was, in response to the Franklin Leonard thing, was like, I can give you my quick version of it. And his quick version of it was 20 tweets and included a lot of huge leaps, right? But the element here that I had not heard before, which I've since heard kind of echoed in other interviews, I think both Vin and other people, is that, and this is all important context for this specific movie, obviously, right? Yeah. He turns down 2, they offer him $25 million. He goes, no, the script sucks. I don't want to just do another Fast and Furious. If you're going to do it, it has to be a saga. It has to be a legacy of these characters. And they went, what the fuck are you talking about? Go eat farts. There's no legacy. No one gives a shit, right? So Vin goes off, he makes Triple X. Triple X is a hit. They go, well, we thought you were David Caruso in NYPD Blue, leaving a hit, but you were right. Now you have your franchise, Triple X. And he went, no, thank you. I'm leaving Triple X. They went, what? He goes, I'm going back to Riddick. Right, Riddick? What are you talking about? He goes, Riddick's the whole thing. He goes into Universal. He presents to them 3 leather-bound volumes. Each one literally locked, like with like an iron lock, and said Pitch Black, which did okay. Yeah. Right, it's a movie that came out in like February and made like $30 million and had a good shelf life on TNT or whatever. Sure. But was not like a huge success, right? But now he's a bigger star. He's launched 2 franchises. He goes, Pitch Black was The Hobbit, and then he drops the volumes on the desk and he says, this is Lord of the Rings. And then he goes, I have 3 keys. You only get each key when you greenlight the movie.
Oh, he's so...
It's so stupid.
I know you're going, he's so stupid. I'm going, he's so smart.
Yeah, it's both. But this is the thing. It's both. It's both. It's both. Right. So, to the best of my knowledge, the latter 2 books have never been opened. Because they were like, well, we should read these so we know if we want to make the sequels. And he goes, no, you have to greenlight first, and then I'll give you the key. So they read the first one. They put fucking $150 million in the Chronicles of Riddick. It blows up on the runway, right? It just, no one gives a shit. It just doesn't really go anywhere. Its legacy is mostly having the best like movie tie-in video game of the 2000s. But the movie's a fucking non-starter. Pacifier's a hit, but it does not give him any credibility. And people are kind of like, oh, you're already like doing self-parody, you know? And then it's like fucking Man Apart bombed, which was shot before Fast and Furious, but kept on a shelf. Babylon AD is the other one that's sat on a shelf for a while. Maybe one other one that I'm forgetting. But he's like pretty much out. Like is completely flamed out as a movie star.
He's a joke.
It's a joke. Yeah. It's a joke. Yeah. It's a joke.
So is Paul Walker at the time as well.
Yep.
Paul Walker's not so much a joke as much as Paul Walker is a non-entity. Like Vin is a national punchline. I remember when he gave that award to Sidney Lumet. I think at the Oscars. Might have been at the Golden Globes when he was shooting that movie Find Me Guilty with the hair and it looked ridiculous. And the juxtaposition of, you know, like one of the 5 best directors ever to live and this fucking goof.
Well, people saying, why is Sidney Lumet making a Vin Diesel movie? Like that's so depressing. Sidney Lumet?
What after he made it was before he made the
Devil. It was before. This was his first movie in like 10 plus years.
Yeah, yes. And and that's
like,
how it felt.
Maybe stay retired. Like, what are you doing? Don't make a Vin Diesel movie.
And the whole thing was awkward, and that would to me was like, you're all done. Like the
thing I always quote that's just like fucking lock it up. Like you're over, Vin. The AV Club review. I don't remember who wrote it. It was maybe Nathan Rabin. Of Babylon AD, which I think was shot in 2006 and comes out in 2008. Comes out the year before this, right? and is just like, this is done. This is the last one.
Right.
This comes out the last fucking weekend of August. It's reviled. It bombs. You're nothing anymore. That review had the line in it that I still think is one of the most scathing burns of an actor, of a movie star I've ever read in a review. It was, describing the plot, and you go, a mysterious man tasked to shepherd a girl. Because Babylon AD is just dumb children of men, is what that movie is, right? So they're describing his character, and in the parentheses it says, Vin Diesel, comma, who for our younger readers was briefly a movie star in the early 2000s.
Jesus.
Wow. It is so concise in just like, we do not have to ever consider the future of this man ever again. Yeah. And not only that, if you're 5 years younger than I am, you don't even really know who this guy is. Like, he's an anomaly. What is this thing? He's a vestige. But Tokyo Drift, they make this budget movie. It over-delivers, right? I think they're screening it. They go, it's pretty good, but let's get something from the original franchise back. Like, we're missing some kind of pop, some kind of hook. So they go to Vin Diesel and they go, would you shoot one scene? You come in at the very end. You're in like 2 shots.
Right.
We'll pay you $250,000.
Jesus.
Yeah. And Vin Diesel goes, keep your money.
Give me the franchise.
Give me the franchise.
No, he says, give me Riddick.
Oh, that's right.
How did he get the franchise?
So he goes, give me the rights to Riddick. I want to own Riddick. And they go, yeah, you want to own Riddick? Yeah, yes. That's a tax write-off. Yes.
You can have it.
Here's Riddick. But when he shows up on set, he starts doing his fucking Vin thing and going, the problem is you never invested in the saga. This is like The Godfather. And they're like, okay, jerk off. They screen the movie with his ending, and people go fucking ballistic.
Yeah. Yep.
Like, it goes up like 1 million points. And they're like, fuck, we kind of can't deny how excited people are for this guy to be behind the wheel of a car again. So then they start the meetings with him, and it was under the auspices of like, this might be direct-to-video. And if it's not direct-to-video, it's like one last one, and it's only conditional on us being able to get all 4 back. And what I understand from that point, sorry, long journey to get here, Phil, is that he pitched, I want to do 2 movies. One is the Brian movie, one is the Dom movie. And I want to do the movies filling in where these characters have been for the last decade, and then they'll collide in what will be the 6th movie. To which they said, fuck off. What are you talking about?
Well, can I also, what needs to... Los Bandoleros also happens, right?
This is why I asked to push back recording half an hour, because I realized I hadn't rewatched Los Bandoleros. Yes, which is very...
Is that true?
Yes.
Because I watched it yesterday too.
Yeah. So Los Bandoleros, which is, he's given, I don't know what the budget was, but he made a very expensive, I would say, student film about...
My understanding is that was kind of the concession. That he had this whole thing of like, you can't do a 4 that starts here. People are going to be wondering what happened to Dom in the Dominican Republic for 9 years. And they were like, we don't give a shit. Everyone wants the movie that's you and Walker together again. Yeah. That's the juice. That has to happen at minute 15 or 20 or whatever. And I think that was sort of the concession of like, we'll give you $200,000, $500,000, whatever the fuck it is, to do a thing. Because at this point, home video is still really robust.
Right.
Anytime you can re-release a movie with like a new special feature.
Directed and written by Vin Diesel.
Right, and they did this with Too Fast too, where before Too Fast came out, they re-released the first movie on DVD with a short film called A Turbocharged Prelude to Too Fast, Too Furious. And so I think they were like, that's worth our time and money, and that also gets Vin to shut up. Let him make his fucking City of God, moody, non-action, where has Dom Toretto been short film. But you watch it and you're like, this is really fucking important. And it like,
I was just gonna say that as much as I don't particularly like Los Bandoleros, I think it's actually important information. Hugely. Like the context going into the beginning of this movie would have been nice to have.
Yes. Forget the important information for a second.
Okay.
This is when Vin did the thing that I think makes this franchise stand out.
Agreed.
He, more than any franchise, and more than any, as you said, Griffin, auteur, Vin is a fan.
Yeah.
And what fans always do is say, what about this guy? What about that guy? Where did this happen? What happened here? And he never leaves a fucking thread hanging out there.
This is the biggest part of it, is that Vin is famously a humongous Dungeons and Dragons guy. That he has been playing the same campaign with his friends since he was a kid. The Last Witch Hunter, for my money, probably the worst of the modern Vin vehicles, is a movie about his character that he's been playing since he was like 13 years old. But the plotting of this franchise, not just in terms of the plotting in the text, but also the strategy of how they think about expanding the franchise, is so Dungeons and Dragons-y in terms of like, you do a campaign, then you regroup. You go like, which character should we bring back again? Which threads should we bring back? How do you evolve things? How do you stay bigger? How do you keep it to the roots? You know, it's constantly that sort of like rejiggering. And just the amount of thought into Los Bandoleros, which once again, if you watch the turbocharged Too Fast, Too Furious prelude, it fucking sucks. It's like, it looks like a fucking Mountain Dew commercial. I mean, it's like fun for what it is, but it's absolutely just like a 2003 time capsule of like, you know, paying too much money to shoot one action sequence with one of the actors, right? And this is like Vin being like, no, the mythology matters. And like, not only is he going like, here's how Han ties into this. You know, this is how we need to set this up, because why was Vin going all the way to Tokyo to see Han? To which the studios, I'm sure, said, Dom went all the way to Tokyo after Han died because you're the star of the first movie. It doesn't matter. Like, you know, but he's like, no, there has to be. And then you look at what they do with the two, Don Omar and Tigo Calderon. I always forget their character's name. Santos and they're established first in this, but they do become kind of an important bridge that only really fully makes sense after 9. Where you, which is once get demented, but in 9 you set up that when Dom gets arrested, the original crime they talk about in the first movie, he meets them in prison, which is why at the end of the first movie, when Brian gives him the getaway car, he drives to the DR because A, he needs to get out of the country, and B, those are the guys he has roots with. And so then you're explaining why he's been there that whole time, why he went to that country, working on these missions. Han gets pulled into this, and then Letty tracks him down, which then becomes an important plot thing in this one.
But let me ask a question. I have a question for both of you guys.
Okay? I want to keep going on this for a second, but go ahead. But
this question does connect to what you're both getting at here, which is originally the idea here is the Dom movie and the Brian movie, which ultimately kind of almost feels like Godfather Part 2, sort of something or like that.
Correct.
If given, I guess my point here is, if Vin was allowed to do what he wanted to do with these movies, are these movies as successful, right? Like it wouldn't have worked.
Okay. Absolutely. And here's another thing. Too Fast, huge hit, but we put forward the theory on our recent Too Fast episode. If Too Fast was more well-liked, this franchise wouldn't have happened.
Right.
Like, because if Too Fast had worked and had been well-received, then they just would have done, okay, every movie, it's Paul Walker and a new criminal solving a car crime as car cops. Like, it would have just become a shitty cop franchise. In the same way where, like, if Tokyo Drift, if Tokyo Drift was a bigger hit, then they would have just kept doing that. Cool, we can make these for $30 million. They turn a profit. You know, like, all these things were so marginal. And what he was pitching at that point was too ambitious. I think it wouldn't have worked. And I also think you needed the same model original parts. Like, you needed to fucking go, they're all back. Like, you needed to do that in one movie. And even if it was in the same movie, but cutting between two different timelines, it wouldn't work. Even if they didn't collide until the last act, it wouldn't work. Like, you do fundamentally need this movie to have them cross paths early, because that's where the action is.
So, two things. Real fast, I want to go back to the thing that you're talking about with Vin and this franchise. The point you made that I loved, Griffin, is the idea of the theoretical studio exec who says to Vin, you're in 3 at the end because you're the star of the movie.
Right.
And that is the shit that we've been made to swallow throughout this whole franchise era. That people could just show up and we're supposed to accept it because we're supposed to also have some kind of distance between the movie, which is not
right. That happened because the fans will like it. And in reality,
yes.
It maybe it gets a pop in the moment, but it leaves a bad aftertaste almost.
Well, you can't do anything with it, and that's that character. You can't do it. That's the end of it, right? You have kind of like singed the end of that nerve, and you blew your wad, and you can't have fun.
Yep.
Vin saying no, this matters.
Every fucking
the whole
fucking
franchise,
right? And,
like
yes. And once again, like he says in 2002, when offered $25 million, you're making a mistake by not taking the Coppola approach with this. And they went like, who the fuck is this guy? But he's so goddamn right. It's that thing of just like, you need to be taking whatever you're doing that seriously and care that much. I think this franchise has a very sharp sense of self-awareness and humor about what it's doing. It knows what world it's existing in, especially as it evolves. But he also understands.
Vin know that? Do you think Vin knows that?
Dude,
yes.
This is 101 shit.
Vin
if you really break this down, like really look at this franchise, this is 101 shit.
Yes.
Because like very simply, starting and ending with cookouts, ending Fast 9 with It's All About Family. He knows that is the undergirding.
Yeah.
The stuff about fucking Tej and Roman going to space, he also gets that that's fun, but that's not what the movie is. If that's what the movie is, it would be a spoof.
Right. So it's that he knows how to balance both of those things. Yeah. Right. It's that he knows that like every time he says family, he says it like it's the most important thing that anyone's ever said.
This is true.
I'm sure
he's not making fun of that at all.
Right.
He believes that deeply.
He shows up at the houses of his Universal executives unannounced at 3:00 in the morning to fucking rant about his theories on family for hours. But I think he understands the function of sending the guys to fucking space. So I think he understands the incredulity of where the series needs to go, while also staying very kind of granular and rooted in what the kind of undercurrent of this whole thing is.
I think, and it's amazing, nine installments in, or 10, whatever, but 9 installments in, I really loved F9. I thought it was fantastic. I loved the young Dom and young Jacob stuff. In a lot of ways that was your Godfather 2 structure, but that really worked for me. It really worked for my son. It really
I know this isn't a F9 episode, this is an ampersand episode, but just a quick thing I want to point out that I think is what I use as a good argument for how self-aware Vin actually is in the grand scheme of things, right? Because he's a movie star, he's a diva, he's got a big ego, right? This thing is like his vanity project, all of that. But I think it is so telling that there's that much time devoted to flashbacks in F9. Like, I did not expect that there would be like 30 minutes.
Yeah, it's pretty substantial.
At least, right? It's like a big chunk of the movie interspersed.
And filling in something very important to this mythology from the first fucking installment.
Right, and filling in little details, big details, all this sort of shit, right? I think it is so telling that he did not do fucking digital de-aging. He didn't play it himself, with makeup, and that he also cast an actor, a young actor, who is giving a very, very different performance than what Vin is currently doing in the timeline of the movies. And that is because if you watch the original Fast and Furious, Vin Diesel's like a weird New York character actor who wants to be a movie star. But he like comes from like fucking black box, like off Broadway theaters and shit, right? He's working as a bouncer and trying to put his plays up and like making short films and shit. And he gives like a fucking like Sundance drama performance in that first movie, And then in this one, he's getting bigger. And then in 5, he gets bigger. And all of them, he gets bigger. And part of it is he comes to understand the mythology of what this character needs to represent, right? That he needs to become mythological as a physical being, right? And suddenly he talks less, he poses more, he becomes more powerful of all of the control of all of his surrounding elements, all that sort of shit. He casts an actor who's doing the kind of thing that he did 20 years ago, because you need to reground the stuff that takes place at that point in the timeline in that same level of verisimilitude, rather than casting some actor who now today wants to be the new Vin Diesel. You know?
Yeah. And yes, and that's, I mean, you brought up something else during it, the way he gets bigger and bigger and more Herculean and more larger than life. This is now, I might be getting way far afield, but like, I believe what he's doing. And this goes back to your first point, Griffin, about, you know, the fan base.
Yeah.
Which a week ago I thought was a bunch of nerds, and now I'm obsessed with everybody involved, because it is a very welcoming fan base, right?
Yeah.
Family. You might say they're a family.
Well, that's the whole fucking point. He's walking the walk here.
Yeah.
But he's a superhero for the franchise era. He has actually made a franchise film by a fan for a fan, and he is the only one giving the fans what they want. But I want to say something else, because I want to bring it back to 4.
And also, like, owns his mistakes, right? Like, like if they fucking err on one franchise entry, the next one fucking course corrects. Like,
they did course correct with 9. A lot of people didn't like 8. So
right.
I mean,
yeah. Well, 8 whatever. 8 made a big mistake, but I have a theory about that too, and it ties into what I'm talking about. What I'm about to talk about. The reason, more than anything, you talked about this in 2 when you with Gabrus quite a bit, is the meta narrative of failing and coming back.
Yeah.
And all of these players have experienced failure, embarrassment, or both.
This is a good recentering, Kenny, because that's the other weird juice that this movie in particular has, is here are 4 people who in 2001 were framed as, are these maybe the stars of tomorrow? And by 2009, Hollywood has said conclusively not.
You are the stars of yesterday, maybe, right? And then,
so there's the Vanity Fair Young Hollywood cover where Brewster and Paul Walker are both on it in 2000, I think.
Yep.
And then like Vin and Rodriguez are arguably the 2 kind of pop more off of that first movie, but then sort of like putter out. By the time that she ends up on Lost, people are like, oh, she's doing TV now.
Yeah,
and then she gets killed off unceremoniously. No, it all like matters, but it did feel like at this point she's been killed off on Lost. Vin has bombed. The Paul Walker movies that are successful, he gets no credit for, right? Like, I'm not saying he deserves it, but something like fucking 8 Below comes out and makes money, and people are like, well, I don't know, it's some Disney dog movie. Like, it doesn't matter who's in the parka, right? It's irrelevant. And Brewster just feels like she's nowhere at this point.
Yeah.
So I think that so all that being true, that's just a lot of purposes here. The fact that they all failed publicly. This franchise kind of failed. This franchise took a lot of L's. One, you don't have the situation where they burn out by the 3rd or 4th movie.
Correct.
So look at something like Pirates. The 4th Pirates movie made a ton of money, but everyone just burned out, right? If there was a situation where Johnny Depp realized, I'm so fucking lucky to have Jack Sparrow in my life, you might still be getting Pirates movies, for instance. Secondly, all the people they kept adding were people who experienced failure. Tyrese, fucking Ludacris, who was kind of like, you know, like a goof rapper at that point. Rock. And
I would refine your language here, Kenny. It might sound persnickety, but I think it's an important distinction. I think the key common attribute is everyone has something to prove.
That's right.
In some way. Like, even the people who are coming into this franchise successful, no, some of them had truly failed, right? And some of them are coming into it successful, but maybe not doing what they want to do, or wanting to show that they can do something else. You know, everyone has something to prove with this franchise. It does not feel like an easy cash in for anybody. Everyone feels very like grateful.
But with the exception of 2 people.
Yeah. Okay. I'm curious to hear which 2 you say.
Statham.
And
Charlize. I think the inclusion of Charlize is, it's too fucking cool. It's like it's too cool. Like she's picking up cool points from being involved. The movie's picking up cred from having her in it. It's not this Helen Mirren like bizarre square peg situation. I really think that Charlize's inclusion, and she looked unbelievable in Fate of the Furious, but like,
and F9.
I think her inclusion rattled me too much.
Look, is that character working for me now? No, but this franchise has salvaged anyone and anything that doesn't seem to be working and find some way to give it value at some point.
True. That's
so
true.
Like, I don't feel like disaster Bale. I agree with you there. I do think she is the closest in terms of actor coming on to Payday, right? Where it's just like, sure, I'll be in this big franchise. Why not?
In one location and get shot out in like 10 days.
Right. But like, she's a serious fucking actress and a box office draw and does action movies.
And a massive movie star.
It's like proving by doing this. It's not like Helen Mirren going like, I never get to work in this genre. This is a fun genre to play in. Yeah. She clearly loves being in these fucking movies, wants to be in more, you know? Mm-hmm. Statham, I will say, whether it's just kind of strategic career business or whether his heart's really in it, I do think he had something to prove coming in, especially if you look at where he's at in his career between 6 and 7, in that's the thing that finally kind of punched him out of the like Lionsgate $50 million budget ghetto. Like he was a proven action star with a very, very firm ceiling in terms of
what was Spy?
Spy is around the same time, I want to say. Spy's like 13, 14.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to. I mean, I don't know. I never thought of Statham as a movie star, but that's just me.
No, it's not that he's a movie star. It's that his casting to me is Expendables-ish. Not what this franchise is about.
It feels a little. This is the other thing I'll say about it. I do think Statham is the one who can overplay the joke. Because as we've said,
I think so too.
It's this line you have to walk of like, this is serious as a heart attack, but you have to know where the comedy is. You have to understand where the comedy is and not play it necessarily. And I think Statham might be a little too smarky, a little too winky. I like the way he's used in 7 the most, when they're just like, he's just fucking Jaws. Like, he's just a shark. He's the Terminator. You know, just make him like so absurdly menacing. Kurt Russell's the other one I would say, although I think he works very well, who's in the Charlize position of like, he doesn't need this. You can argue maybe there's a little bit more of him wanting to be like, oh, reintroduce myself to the younger kids and whatever.
Can I ask a Kurt Russell question just very quickly?
Go ahead.
Yeah. F9. What happened? We see a video of him, and then they never fucking tell us if he's dead or alive.
They'll tell you.
It's another case file where I just go like, okay, cool. I assume you'll give me some answer to that I appreciate.
Someday they'll come back full circle on this. Fair enough.
Right. I no longer view like hanging threads in these movies.
That's totally fair. I left the theater with a bunch of friends, and they're all just like, did I miss something, or did they just not tell us what happened to Kurt Russell?
But also speaks to the world these movies have set up now, because like the movie starts with being like, here's video of him dying, and we sit there the entire time and go like, but is he really dead or not? Like,
no one stays dead in this series.
Right.
It means nothing.
Right. There's something else I wanted to say about
Sorry,
everyone. No. It was 18 points ago. Everyone in this franchise having something to prove. That's a huge part of it. Oh yes, I know what I was gonna say, and I think leads to this weird emotional investment people have in this franchise. That it is like this little engine that that these actors willing themselves into remaining key parts and sticking around for 5th and 6th and 7th movies and all that sort of stuff. There's this like underdog spirit to it that still exists, even though it's technically an overdog franchise. And a lot of that is also just the passage of time, the weird boyhood effect of being able to see these people grow and go, oh, that is exactly how we dressed in 2005 or whatever, right? Yeah. But I think the other thing, to your point, we're talking about all these like, because these are all the questions you have to ask when talking about Ampersand. I know we barely talked about the meat of the movie itself, but almost all these things we're talking about are kind of more important than the movie itself, although I have things to say.
I agree.
But you ask all these questions about like, how did it end up this way, right? What went right? What went wrong? What could have gone wrong? Or all this sort of stuff. Fundamentally, it's like this movie couldn't exist if they had listened to Vin back in 2002. Because this is what he would have pitched, I imagine, for Too Fast. When they gave him a script and $25 million and he said, fuck you, page 1 rewrite, here are my notes. And they went, no. I'm sure this is what he said. You need to do the movie that's about, he comes back for the Dominican Republic. He crosses paths with Brian again. They have this uneasy, whatever. The return movie. And I don't think that movie carries the same weight if 8 years haven't passed. I think there's something about the fact that even though there are 2 Fast and Furious movies in between, these dynamics have been laying totally dormant for the better part of a decade at this point, right? The Mia-Brian dynamic, the Brian-Dom dynamic, the Brian-Mia dynamic, the Dom-Letty dynamic. Those 4 things, which, a ropey element of the first movie. We were all tweeting about our franchise rankings, and I said a thing about how I think the first movie is very poorly directed. And you guys and other people were like coming to like, what? Come on, it's one of the best ones. I'm like, look, I rank it number 3 in the franchise. I just think objectively, that's not the strength of that movie. Rob Cohen's the worst director this franchise has ever had. Yeah. That movie works for a bunch of other reasons. It overcomes it. It has the right texture. They hired the right actors. The script, which I think was largely written by Vin Diesel on the day. They made it work and all that sort of shit. But it's one of those things where you're like, Paul Walker's bad in the first movie. I think he gets better as an actor across these films. I think he's best in 7. In the first one, he's a very, very pretty man with very, very flat line readings, but he is one of those guys where you're like, he does have whatever that undeniable, undefinable movie star thing is. This guy is very watchable. This guy grounds the thing, even though he is not behaving like any naturalistic human being I've ever witnessed, right? And speaking to that, it's just like the chemistry between him and Vin, and the chemistry between him and Brewster, and likewise between Vin and Rodriguez, was just fucking undeniable in that first movie. Like, just anytime there's one of those 2 on screen, it's just like, there's like juice here, Well,
this fits. I will say this film feels the most like the first film in terms of subject matter, in terms of sort of the grit that it's trying to do. Yeah. And then it's also the bridge to making the series possible off of it. But I would also say this is the last film that kind of feels purely Fast and Furious. Because then, you obviously Fast 5, which is fantastic, but like you've inserted The Rock into this thing. Yeah. It's already become much bigger, and then it only gets more sort of preposterous and bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, this is the most grounded. Yes. And then it's off to the races, right? Because it feels I
hadn't rewatched this one in a decade, and it just moved up a bunch in my ranking. Because talk about this franchise being this weird living text, right? Yeah. At the time, I was just like, this movie's so fucking ridiculous. Like, it's tonally so all over the place. Yeah. The weird action sequences feel so disconnected from the scenes that are treating the Dom and Brian saga like it is The Godfather and whatever. And now the movie feels very like stripped down, very raw, very pure, but it is like it was building the bridge between those 2 things. As you're sort of saying, like 5, now it's a heist movie, right? And then by 7, you go like, now they're Mission Impossible. Like they start working in these other genres too. Right. So this franchise's weird like birth as, let's make a small $20 million movie about an underground culture, is now a bunch of guys sitting in a room trying to design the most insane set pieces possible, and then going, and how do we explain why these are the only people who can do it?
They've stopped basically doing that at this point.
Right. Well, they don't need to anymore. They've been so successful so often. It makes a lot of sense.
Now at this
you
point,
call in the A-team. But no, I feel the same way.
But they're the A-team at this point, and this movie, it still makes sense why these characters are doing things without any stretch, without any reach.
I mean, as I was watching this movie, I was texting Phil, I think this might be my favorite. It's really good. Before I went through like this new little renaissance, I would very proudly stand and say the first is my favorite. That was always my favorite. I love the first, set the dynamics, it's grounded, makes sense to me. Yeah. That's the heart of the movie. But now I feel like 4, because it's that bridge, because you still have the street racing elements, which are really fucking great, because you come back to these dynamics missed. And I think, you can't, I keep thinking about, Jordan playing baseball. This idea of you had this great thing and then it went away and you never thought you were going to get it again. And then you got it like even more. right?
I never thought about how well this tracks onto the Fast and Furious franchise.
Well, I think about that a lot.
Yeah.
Jordan playing baseball, because I wasn't a Bulls fan. I was a Knicks fan.
Right.
But
go play baseball, go make a movie. Like, what are you going to be now, Michael Jordan? And he was like, fuck it. I got to stop trying to not be Michael Jordan. I'm back on the court.
I'm back on the court.
Right. And the appreciation you have getting Jordan back is not dissimilar to the appreciation being like, I saw the ersatz versions.
Yeah.
They're not the same.
Right. This franchise needs that amount of time in between the first movie and this one. It needs that amount of false starts for what the franchise should be.
Biggest fucking element of it.
It needs all of that. And at the beginning of this, when they put Han in, you're like, that's kind of a nice wink and a nod. But when in 5 they start going like, all of this matters. We're not ignoring any of the shit from the 2 movies that quote unquote didn't count. Yeah. Like, that's when your mind starts exploding.
I want to piggyback on both these things, because I'm watching these films and I call my friend who's a diehard fan, and I said to her, like, just explain to me why you love these movies, because I just need to understand from someone who loves them.
Another thing I find fascinating from a fan perspective is I feel like the answers you hear are very different.
They're all very different. Yeah. But she said 2 things that I think speak very much to what both of you were saying. The first is it was the comeback story. It was the idea of, I was a fan, I stuck with it, I went to see Fast 2 in the theater, I went to see Tokyo Drift in the theater.
And my local team, I've been rooting for them. My dad took me to games. They sucked for 20 years, you know?
Yeah. And then to Kenny's point, and then fucking Jordan came back, and I sat through all the other bullshit, and now they're back, and I feel like I've been through something that. So I do get it. I do understand the underdogness of this series for sure, and that it had to.
What was the other thing she said?
Well, the other thing she was saying was just about sort of what you were saying too, about also just sort of sitting in the theater. She's like, when you see these movies in a theater, it's like a religious experience. You're packed in a theater with a bunch of people, which was different than the experience I had, which is I watched 8 of these films on my TV. And I saw 9 in the theater, and I was like, "Oh, I get it." Kenny, you texted me the other day too, where
I'd never seen one in the theater since one.
Wow. Right,
and one obviously didn't have that kind of fan engagement.
And you guys both saw 9 in theaters.
Correct.
Both saw 9 in theaters.
And audiences just applaud. I mean, it also helps that you haven't been able to see a movie in a year and a half, but it's still.
But I will say, like, I feel like every Fast and Furious movie since this one I've seen in theaters has had a similar type of reaction. Like, it is like the one franchise where I'm just like, if I go see that thing on opening weekend, I'm gonna have like a rhapsodic time. It is.
People just love it.
I don't like yell shit out at movies, and I've told this story before, but in Fast 5, when there's like the shootout and you think The Rock's gonna die, and Vin reaches out his fucking veiny forearm to grab The Rock's veiny forearm, and like enemies are now brothers, I yelled out Fast motherfucking 5 at the AMC, 42nd Street,
so cool.
25, like Friday night, opening night, just clocking off of a shift as a part-time cast member at the Disney store. And it was like on the biggest screen at the biggest multiplex in New York City. An entire audience just applauded. And it was just the one time I was like, my instincts were right. Someone needed to say it. We were all thinking it. You know, like it was just this moment of like, I can't believe they're fucking doing this. And I feel like there's also, you know, I've seen these movies in different types of setups and circumstances in terms of seeing them in theaters for the first time. You know, in terms of who I see them with, in terms of what type of screening I'm going to, all these sorts of things. But there does seem to be this equalizer where I feel like you get in there and you could sort of suss out, like, these are the people who view this franchise as fucking serious as a heart attack for them. These are the people who love it ironically. These are the people who haven't seen any of them, but their friends drag them. All of this. And then at some point, everyone's just kind of on the exact same level.
Yeah.
I want to mention something that I texted you, Kenny, the other day, because I'm not a wrestling person, Griffin. Just
I was going to bring this up too,
but I think that's an important part of it. Yeah.
And I think what's interesting is, I mentioned this to Kenny, but like, no one stays a villain. In this series, which is similar to wrestling in a lot of ways, or at least what I know of wrestling. This idea of just sort of like, we're all kind of in this together, and we might not agree on certain things, but we're going to find a common ground. Or what is, Kenny, forgive me, what is it called when you're a villain in
a heel?
Wrestling?
A heel turn is the classic.
Heel's a bad guy, face is a good guy, or baby face is a good guy, and I keep it's because you ignore the Deckard Shaw thing for a second, which is very hard to kind of wrap your head around.
Yeah.
But the thing, I kept like texting Phil earlier this summer about like, what is the deal with Loki? Don't people remember that this motherfucker tried to destroy the fucking world, and now we're supposed to just enjoy him on a television show?
Okay. I mean, I don't want to go too far down this corridor, but I've been thinking about this a lot because I think for how much like the Marvel thing is so planned out, look at how smart they are, 20 steps ahead, and working off of fucking volumes upon volumes of material over like the better part of a century now. There are things in the Marvel franchise that still bump for me where I'm like, why are you all acting like this character is this? They were this.
Right.
Yeah.
At some point, the franchise changed its mind because that wasn't working, or
that's the bullshit I was talking about,
Yeah,
Griffin. We're supposed to just eat it because Tom Hiddleston's charming.
But here's what's wild, okay? Because this is where I've been thinking about all this. It's not like the Fast and Furious franchise doesn't make even bigger character swings like that. You look at fundamentally how different Tej is in Too Fast, Too Furious to F9. They are not the same character on any fucking level. They are almost the opposite characters, right? And even the way they reintroduced the Tokyo Drift trio in 9, you're like, now they're the lone gunmen? Like, what? All these
That
things.
was great.
This is the point. I love all of this. And it's because part of it is, I think, A, they're never making the obvious choice, right? It doesn't just feel like, I'm going to give a bad example here, you correct me, but like, oh, well, this wrestler is so popular with the kids that we have to make them a face now, even though they were originally written to be a heel. I was about to say Hulk Hogan, but Hulk Hogan was a good guy originally.
Hulk Hogan
later.
Yeah,
right?
but if you allow me, I'll get into it for like a moment.
But there are examples of that, right? Where it's like there's an asshole wrestler who then the kids start loving, and they're selling the toys, and they're like,
happens all the time.
Needs to be a good guy. Yeah.
The best example, of course, is The Rock.
Right.
Who was a hated wrestler, right? But The Rock earned he earned his face turn. They always earn their face turn. Yes. And just like in this movie, the thing about The Rock was, or Hobbs, is he's always protected. He is never irredeemable the way like Deckard Shaw kind of was irredeemable.
Correct.
And that's the hardest one to swallow.
So this is the distinction I want to make, is that like Hobbs, it was always a job, right?
And he was
the opposite side of the law
guy, ostensibly, right?
And he's bound by a certain kind of internal code and all these things that like Dom is able to respect from a distance. And Dom's whole relationship with Brian is all about his uneasy relationship with people on the opposite side, and honor among thieves, and all this sort of shit, right? I think the difference is the choices the Fast and Furious franchise makes are so weird that it doesn't just feel like, well, this is calculated that you now just want this person to be this. You allow them to let Hobbs make a face turn, A, because I think they set it up properly, even though it only happens within the span of one movie. I think they earned it. But B, because when you're doing such weird moves of turning the fucking Pimp My Ride guy from the first movie into your straight man computer hacker in the 5th movie, you're like, look, you're on some other grid here that I can't see, so I just trust you. But the other bigger fact is, I think as much as these movies do not care about real world logic in a lot of ways, the other thing I always equate them to are soap operas, in that you can kind of fucking do anything, right? You can bring characters back from the dead, you can have identical twins, right? You can justify any sort of things as long as it's rooted in what the audience really wants to see, which I think is a very hard thing for filmmakers to know oftentimes. And it gets into this fan service shit you were sort of talking about earlier, of like, what do they think they want to see versus what will actually satisfy them?
Yes.
And I feel like Lynn in particular is always on the right side of that. But the other part of this is, I think emotionally, the logic is almost always airtight with these movies. Well, I think the Deckard Shaw thing is like the one egregious example, and it's the reason why it's the thing that everyone bumps on, because you're just like, if they're going to accept him into their family, and he did indeed kill Han, then he has to do a lot more to earn it.
That's why they gave him a baby in the 8th one. They're like, you can't hate a guy with a baby.
Right, but it's also, I mean, this is the other problem is like...
You got to do more.
I agree.
And also, this is the fundamental issue with that film for me. I'll just say this as quickly as I can. Is that movie is so broken by The Rock and Vin Diesel not wanting to be in the same scene, but also wanting to have equal ownership of the film. They had to bifurcate a narrative in which both of them could be the hero of their own independent halves of the movie, which then becomes Vin's doing his thing, not with his family, which is not what you want to see as an audience. And Hobbs is now running Vin's team, which is also not what you want to see an audience. Because emotionally, talking about emotional logic of it, I think you could have successfully made a movie in which Deckard Shaw redeems himself and is accepted by the family.
Absolutely.
I think you also could successfully make a movie in which the other half of that narrative is that Dom has seemingly turned bad and they're trying to save him.
Right.
I think the biggest fucking issue is the leader of that team cannot be Hobbs. Like, the problem is Fate of the Furious could work if Letty is the lead. It has to be that Letty is the one who is keeping the family together because she's got the fucking ties to everyone, because she's the one who refuses to give up on Dom, that she's the one who's going to be looking at fucking Deckard Shaw askance, asking him to prove himself, rather than The Rock just doing like a dick measuring contest with him. And the problem is that Fate really, really kind of puts Letty, Tej, and Roman, but Letty in particular, in the background, at which point you're essentially having The Rock look at the audience and go, look, I want to do the movie with Statham, so Statham's okay, right? Like, he's just telling you, like, it's like bringing an asshole to a party and going like, he's cool, I vouch for him. He's not going to start a fight.
Yeah, and it's beneath this movie and beneath this franchise.
And you're like, it's my birthday party. Ask me. I probably would have said yes, but fucking ask me. Don't just show up and tell me it's going to be fine. Know whose house it is.
Your point, and this is all a larger. The point you're making, you keep coming back to it, is about emotional logic. And I want to like hone in on that, because I would say, for me, I watched these movies 5 through 8 incorrectly at first.
Okay.
And I think a lot of people watch wrestling incorrectly. I think a lot of people watch soap operas incorrectly. And I think a lot of people watch action movies, and particularly this franchise, incorrectly.
Wrestling, much like we're talking about, that same line of like very in on the joke, played very straight.
100%. And new quote unquote newbies in the wrestling world who are genuinely, curious and interested in getting into it. Looks like fun. Think what they're supposed to do is freak out when crazy things happen in the ring and when people do wild shit.
Backstage.
And I'm not saying you're not supposed to do that.
Yeah.
Just like you're not supposed to cheer when, they jump a bridge from one car to another. But that's not what you should be looking for.
Those are the set pieces. You're looking for the backstage. You're looking for the narratives that are being woven in the sides, the pockets, the margins of this shit. And that's where you feel so rewarded when these things come together. And especially when wrestling's another thing where they're constantly changing their plans based on how things are going. When something works, it feels so validating because you're like, this came out of nothing. This shouldn't have worked.
The best feeling in wrestling is when you had, and this is the best feeling in any fandom, comic books, Star Wars, Muppets, anything that you go deep on.
Yeah.
When you feel like something that I have from 20, 30, 40 years ago mattered to this moment.
Yeah.
Oh, it's like it is sexual.
And not only that,
it's orgasmic.
I'd say even the heightening of that is like, it's not heightening. I feel like what this franchise often feels like to me is I forgot that was even in my backpack.
Right.
Like you saying, oh, it's when something you've had for all this time finally pays off. It's like Fast and Furious is kind of the best for me at being like, I not only did I forgot that existed, I was certain I had thrown that out.
Yeah. Well, when I was on the phone with my friend, she said that the moment that she'll always remember was seeing Fast 5 opening weekend and the post-credit scene when Eva Mendes shows up and says, "Do you believe in ghosts?" And the audience just lost their fucking minds.
And by the way, the pop at the Eva Mendes reveal was insane. Where I was just like, wow, that's fucking huge. And people were like hooting and hollering. The fact that there were 2 pops in one post-credit sequence was just like, that's the same year as Avengers, you know? It's wild to me. But you speak about like the emotional logic of this franchise, right? And this movie is a bridge to all of it. The thing I think they identified so well is I talked about how good the chemistry is in the original casting of these original parts that have now been placed in a new model, right? but the major gift they've been given, and honestly, I think it's like the best thing about the first Fast and Furious, and is the thing that made me as a 12-year-old who did not like cars or action movies, walk out of the theater and go like, I kind of like that, was the weird, messy ending.
Yeah.
You know, that you have, like, you think you know where this thing is fucking going, and then here he pulls this crazy fucking stunt. He drives the car over the train, and he barrel rolls, and he spins. Paul Walker runs up to him. He has his like, that was this thing, whatever. And then Paul Walker, like, hears the sirens, looks over, sees him at the distance, looks at Vin, I owe you a car, gives him the keys. Silent look of acknowledgement, gets in the car, drives off. Movie's over. And you were just like, that's odd. This movie, there's no lesson. There's no, like, we're not seeing him get his happy ending, but we're also not seeing him get any comeuppance. Like, what does Paul Walker do now? He's just standing there. What's he going to say to these cops? Like, all of that's kind of fascinating, right? And the ending, you know, where 2 picks it up, where it's like, oh, now he's just a guy, he used to be a cop, and he's into car shit, but they can lure him back, but he'll bring in other car people, whatever. It's like, at least interesting version of the character, right? But what this movie gets back to is
him being a cop, first of all.
Well, yes, right now he's a Fed.
Yeah.
But it gets to a thing that I think is very potent, which is there are 2 romances in that first movie. Were either of them real? Right?
Right.
The first Fast and Furious movie did not market itself as an undercover cop movie. It marketed itself as an underground street racing movie. Yeah. In the 30-40 minute mark, when he goes and meets with fucking Ted Levine for the first time, I remember in the theater going like, what?
Yeah.
That wasn't
Tim Roth. Yeah.
Right. No one said this was goddamn Point Break. That was not pitched this way, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's part of the weird investment we as an audience have with this franchise is you found out that Brian was a cop only shortly before the characters in the universe do. You also feel kind of tricked by it. And it feels a little dirty, like, is this guy going to fuck over my friends? Because those other actors are very compelling, you know? I don't want to see him turn on them. And then the rest of that movie is that tension of like, is the Mia thing real or not? Is the Dom thing real or not? You know, I mean, people make the homoerotic jokes, but this franchise is so much about
it is a romance.
Male intimacy.
That's okay, right?
And the family and the love and all this sort of shit. And the Mia relationship where you just go like, well, I understand, okay, she's a hot lady, you know, he wants to lay her or whatever. But there's that question of like, but does he actually care for her? And does he actually have the level of respect for Dom that we think he does? So then to have this movie pick up 8 years later, have them cross paths again, and have this thing where like Dom's first instinct is like, fuck you, get out of here. Yeah. I am ratting you to everyone. Why would I keep your cover for anyone? But he doesn't, because Dom secretly is like, but what if that was real? You know, that's what this movie's about. Because Mia is a much harder sell. Like, Mia takes a lot longer in this movie to let Brian in.
This is the most substantive Brian Mia movie for sure. Because like basically from this point on, she's kind of emotional wallpaper, unfortunately. Like she doesn't really get a whole lot to sink her teeth into. But like they get a couple really good scenes in this movie where like you actually do get inside her head.
Yeah, and I do like this thing of like the difference between them being like in their fucking early 20s versus their early 30s at this point or whatever. Where it's like, okay, we saw him go off in another movie where Evan Mendez was his new love interest and they had a weirdly non-sexual relationship, right? He's Paul Walker, he's the best looking guy in the world. Once again, you could see a universe in which every year they made a different car cops movie with a different love interest and a different sidekick, right? But then this movie, he comes back and immediately, both of them, it's just like, fuck, that was a real thing, wasn't it? You know, and it's a real thing. It's easier for them to acknowledge that because it was a sexual thing and across that line. The Dom thing is so much more ephemeral because you can also tell how equally hurt Dom was by it. Because it's like, I don't fucking trust people. I don't let people in. I had every justified doubt about you. Every alarm was going off. And against my fucking better judgment, I let my guard down. And I was right. You were a fucking rat. But yet you did that one inexplicable thing at the end. You gave me something. Yeah. You let me get away. Why did you do that? And everyone keeps on asking him in the movie, like, why did you do that?
I'll throw something else out there. All right, so this is the first one and the fourth one are very similar. I think the end of the fourth movie is maybe half a tick below the end of the first.
I would argue it's the best ending. As much as I love the first
fair
ending,
enough.
The
Crazy
ending,
about
which
the
I
end.
want to make sure we talk about for a little bit, is the moment where I went like, "You son of a bitches, I will be with you until the end of time." Like that was the moment where I was
totally agree with you.
You have fully got me on board.
So I think we can connect the two. So the other thing about this Fast and Furious first ending is obviously it's waiting on Point Break to some extent.
Yeah.
But like he really sent Johnny really sent Bodhi off to die. Like
that's the key difference.
That is like it was I will let you go because I know you're about to go die.
Right. And it's fascinating because both of the endings are good guy lets, in quotes here, right? Law enforcement official lets criminal ride off.
Yes.
But the difference is Bodhi is riding off into his death and Dom is actually riding off into an unknown future, right? He's actually being given an out. You don't know what comes of him, but he's actually being given an exit.
So even that version of it, because the other movie I want to bring up that came out just a couple years before this, one of my favorite movies is Donnie Brasco, which is very much this dynamic, which almost had, uncle nephew, I would say.
Sure.
But the whole movie, you're really hoping that one way or another he'd let Al Pacino off the hook.
Right. That's the thing. You
doesn't.
Yeah. Yes.
Right. So you're getting what I'm saying. We've been set up by culture to believe that in the end of the day, the cop, one way or another, is going to uphold the law.
Look, and here's another thing. I don't want to get caught in the weeds with this shit because I know you have a heart out, and we got a lot to say still. But this is one of the things that makes like undercover cop fiction inherently interesting. Because especially in movies, you're dealing with these are fake people playing fake people, playing fake people. Acting out scripts that were designed in a boardroom and trying to make us believe that this is a real crime scene and all this sort of shit, right? And so genuinely as an audience member, it is impossible to gauge how on the level anyone is. It is impossible to gauge how much they actually have come to care for this person they're now undercover with, or are just putting on fucking airs, and it gives you that Donnie Brasco tension of like, I want this to be happy for everyone, I like these two actors together.
I want to connect this to Fast 10 even.
Yeah.
Fast 9, F9, because
what
the joke of F9, for again, people who like don't really like the movie or don't really like the franchise and watch them the wrong way, is they go to space.
Yeah.
But what you must remember about this film and this franchise is it is a fundamentally a wish fulfillment franchise.
Correct.
And the end of this first movie and the end of this fourth movie are both wish fulfillment. The wish fulfillment that the connection that can't be real is real. And that's what's so beautiful about it.
Okay, so I want to tie two more things to this. This is like the spider web. If someone tries to map out every time I go,
it's
okay,
like
that's four things I want to bring back in from here.
I always think of that Simpsons when the garbage is overflowing and Bart just staples the banana peel on the side so he doesn't have to take it out. Yeah, it just keeps stapling the banana peel.
It's part. Let me just add a couple more banana peels here. No, but I think here two linked things why these two sequences work: the end of this one and the space sequence, right? The thing that that stuns me the most in how they pulled off the space sequence, which I think they fully do, and that had been, I think it was seen as an inevitability. It was sort of a joke that became like, but they actually are going to do it at some point, right? There's only so much they can do. There's only so far they can escalate. It's inevitable. It has to happen. And then it becomes, how do you do this and not break the reality of these movies, right? The reality of these films is already tenuous, but you want some sort of emotional logic, to these people agreeing to do this, to these people being the ones who need to do this. Why would any car need to be in space? Like, this sort of shit. Like, you do need to, they're not going to enroll in NASA, right? Like, all these things do sort of matter. And I was very kind of dubious about them pulling it off. And then I had heard like whispers from friends of friends of friends who knew people who were like in development on the movie saying like, this is what I've heard how they're going to handle the space thing. And it's like, they're just a little bit out, in the atmosphere and they're in a car. So they're like not in a spaceship at this and that. And I was like, visually that sounds like the right thing, but like still, how do you build up to that moment? Whatever, right?
Yeah.
When they're strapped to the rocket, I'm like, okay, I'm loving that they're going for this, but can you land this? Can you land this? The thing that fucking works is that moment out of nowhere, the thing in the backpack that you had already like thought you threw out ends up being the culmination of this arc that they, I think, very smartly weave into that movie of Roman starting to become self-aware of the weird rules of this universe.
Yeah.
And you have this sort of joke plot line of he thinks he's invincible, he keeps on putting himself into danger, everyone's dispelling it. That's kind of resolved, right? Or so you think.
Sort of.
Right, and then in the car, he has this moment where Tyrese, who has gone on to just become the comic relief of this franchise, right? Like the most ridiculous, emotionally unstable character in the family, gets pretty like sober and focused. Yep. As they cut back to the fucking action on the ground, silent, right? Just scored by pretty like modest music. And Roman just has this moment of clarity and he's like, look, you're probably right. None of this means anything. Like it's completely, I don't know why we're still alive. I don't know why we've done these things. It's probably irrelevant. We're probably just lucky.
We're probably about to die.
Yeah.
But shouldn't we just go all the way? And it's like this moment of the characters having to be like, fuck, yes, I do want to be an F9. I want to be an F9. It's like this moment where you need them to convince the audience that we can go along with them by having the characters go like, has this gone too far?
But can I just say that is...
it out of meta shit, and Roman just was like, it's probably all meaningless, but we've come this far. And I'm here with you. Shouldn't we fucking drive this car into a satellite?
But can I just say, I agree 100% with you. Yeah. And I would also say that it's why the submarine, as much fun as the final thing at the end of F8 is fun.
Emotionally untethered.
Completely untethered from anything.
It's just a visual idea. It's just a visual idea.
And that feels to me like the Justin Lin element to a certain degree as well, I would assume. Which is that like, he comes back to the series, he's doing these 3 films, and you can just feel that there's a weight, there's the emotional language that's back into this series. It's that course correct that we were speaking of earlier, where it just feels like somehow they stick the landing on the space stuff when it should not work.
I think he's got a great compass on this shit, and I think he and Vin balance each other out really well with their instincts.
It's so perfectly calibrated. That's fan service too, but in a way that doesn't feel insulting, doesn't feel like it's over the top. I'm almost amazed. And then you talk about like the characters wanting to be an F9, because this is my like my current thing, which is like, why why do the characters want to be an F9? Like, why do people keep going after massive success? Right? Why keep doing it? Right? If we're a capitalist society and everybody has to eat, if you can eat for the rest of your life and all that, why keep doing it? Well, part of me, I mean, it sounds glib, but part of me says, well, what else are you going to do? Right? But I mean that in the opposite way, which is sitting on my couch. I've sat on my couch enough in my life to know that that's an easy way to like be really bored and be really miserable and really depressed. And the most important thing you could do is get out and do things. And if you have the opportunity to be in Fast 9, and I'm talking about if you have the opportunity to be someone like Roman Pierce, and go on the Fast 9 missions, that's so fucking cool.
But that's like,
you owe it to yourself to do it.
If you think about what is going on in that character, in that soliloquy he delivers in a rocket-powered car before driving into a submarine, right? He's essentially saying, I went from being the tough guy in these movies to being the fucking Joe Pesci, right? Like the guy in the back seat who fucking freaks out and
talking about a Lethal Weapon.
Yeah, and like hates that he's in these movies, right? Like his role is to be like, what are we doing? This is a bad idea. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
Like he's the brakes in this franchise.
Yeah.
And then in 9, he goes through this whole thing of like, wait, if I'm the logical one, everyone else is crazy, but they're all proven correct, and I never die, and things keep on escalating, then something greater is at play.
Yeah.
And that final moment is, and I find this very profound, him just going like, no, maybe this is all arbitrary, but like, why not fucking live?
Yeah.
Why not live?
Why be scared of this shit? Like, I cannot find solace in there being some greater plan for me and some greater meaning to this. But also, what am I going to do? Not fucking...
But it also feels, it's like you said, where he's the brakes and then he becomes the gas in 9, right? Like he becomes the guy that's like, fuck it, we got to do it. Like that's it's
the irony of the whole thing. And Phil, I know this is one of your bet noirs, but the irony of the whole thing is, had Paul Walker not died, they never would have played this Brian character like this, because it's so antithetical to the
talking about him being off screen, like Vera,
him being off screen, him being like quote unquote retired.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's so antithetical to the spirit of this, where Mia, is she's just in the bullpen, ready to go when you need her.
I would absolutely believe Mia staying at home as a parent, never coming out into the battlefield ever again. And Brian, as he's set up as a character, it does not make sense. But once again, you speak to the weird 1 foot in, 1 foot out understanding of the audience, combined with the emotional logic that they're tracking with these movies. They're doing the calculation that I think they were 100% correct about, which is whether or not it ever would have been written that way were he still alive.
It felt right to me too.
It would be more upsetting to an audience to kill the character off and not give him a happy reality because the actor died than to say, he's alive, he's really happy, he's right there in that box.
I
swear to you, if you look under the box, he's there.
I got teary-eyed when the car pulled up.
Yes.
And for the majority of the movie,
and you also go, please don't let him step out of the car. And they don't, because they're smart. You don't want to see the creepy CGI guy.
Yeah, you really don't. It's
or Caleb Walker, who my wife used to date.
Hey.
So there we go.
There we go.
I know.
So can I ask
you got up with this guy?
I have a question for you, Griffin, just because obviously you're here.
Tie this back.
We'll tie this back up, but just very quickly, I in terms of Roads Not Taken, no pun intended. Sure. This film was originally supposed to be released on June 12th. 2009. It was then pulled up to April 3rd, 2009. Had this film been released in June, do we think it does as well as it did?
It's tough. I mean, look, the opening weekend of this movie was so bananas.
And I do want to talk. We'll do the box office game very quickly, which I'm sure you know. But
it was like, I would say, double the highest estimate of what it would do. Like, it wasn't just like, oh, that overperformed. It was like overperformed by tens of millions of dollars. Yes. So I think clearly there was a love for these characters in that original film that had been
dormant,
and sort of unrecognized.
Yes.
I certainly think it helped that it was released at a time with like no competition.
And opens up April. It makes April like a month where you can release a movie like this.
Right, which also largely happens because the Fast and Furious movies start to stay in that zone. Correct. You know, I mean, they kind of keep on going like, should we do a summer release? And this one ended up coming out June, obviously, but most of them have been April movies from here on out. I think, yes, like, I think the success was so huge and so unexpected that it could not have just been timing, and that has been borne out by the following films. But I think to be able to go like, oh, they made a 4th Fast and Furious movie, what's that going to open to? 20, best case scenario, and then it opens to 70? Yeah. Certainly made everyone sit the fuck up.
When that really mattered, too. That was wild.
Right. And then you're doing 70 in April. Immediately then they go like, I guess Fast 5 has $100 million budget. Like it changes the next movie.
It's just, it's one of those things where the summer of 2009 wasn't stacked for all intents and purposes, which I'm sure you know. Like it had a couple bright spots, but for the most part, you had Star Trek in there.
Right. Star Trek's like the big May movie.
But but like 2008 was huge and 9 was kind of thin. So who knows if this film might have performed in June? It might have, but I do think April gives it a runway.
Yes. And I think, it just, wow, that immediately makes Universal take notice and go, we need to put more money into these movies. And also people care about the past of these movies. Justin Lin, bring back any fucking characters you want.
So, and you got to give, sorry, go ahead.
Oh no, let's keep on this, but with my last 10 minutes, I want to talk about the end of this movie.
Yeah,
sure.
And get
for it.
Let me speed around a couple things very quickly while you're
if
here.
You're cool, I'm gonna blow, and you can hang with Phil for a little more.
I'll chat with Griffin further.
I think we'll work towards the end of the runway. But I think in my mind's eye when I ranked this movie lower, I think I weirdly, and it's weird sometimes just how movies stick in your brain in an incorrect way. You sort of like rewrite them or re-edit them in your head. I remembered like most, if not all, of the action sequences feeling as sort of gummy and plasticky as the final action set piece in this, which is really bad. The tunnel sequence that looks like a fucking arcade
like a Disney
racing
ride.
game at a movie theater. Yes.
There are a lot of tunnels.
Yeah, like an old one. And it's just, it looks bad. It's not practical, which I think Lin really puts his foot down about on the next movie. The bank vault in Fast 5 is a great case for the value there is that they were in the real fucking streets doing this. That looks really gummy and shitty. And because of that, it just kind of is lacking in stakes. The movie sort of like loses a lot of tension there at that point. It's also weird this movie's reliance on driving backwards as if that's a trick that's equally as impressive as drifting. Right. It's just like, okay, I don't even drive, and even I'm not impressed by that. But I think all the emotional stuff works, as we said. I think the sort of dual courtship narrative of Brian winning back both of these people and both of these Torettos learning to accept Brian again really works for me. I think like Gal Gadot's a great example of just being like, no reason to bring this character back, except this actor's kind of like over delivering. Yeah. There's something there. Why not figure out some new role to put her in, which is like, it just speaks to that.
Also healed the face, like no problem, and just she makes sense. They were all kind of on the same time anyway. Yeah, I thought that was really cool too.
John Ortiz, I think, gives a good performance in this, but it's the thing they start to correct on the next movie, which is, you need villains that either are equally good at driving, equal physical threats, or both, right? Like you can't just have it be a colorful crime boss again. It can't just be a guy like chewing some scenery, because you need someone to be able to get into the dirt with them.
Even Luke Evans isn't even the greatest villain either.
He's not the great, but it's like you see them doing the calculations.
No, my friend who's a massive fan just is Owen Shaw obsessed.
Really?
Yeah,
interesting.
That scene with him and Dom outside in London, when they had their tete-a-tete, like he thinks it's like the greatest scene of the
Interesting. All right.
I need to rewatch 6 too. Okay, but so those are my speed round notes, just so I'm not skipping over basics of this movie that we've talked around for a lot. But I do think the opening tanker heist sequence is incredible. It's so fucking good. It's really Lin showing like, hey, and if you give me more money, I could do this for the whole movie. You know.
But it brings you right back to what was so cool about the first one. Like those on the road heists were just so incredible. Yeah. And again, kind of taught me to watch this franchise wrong.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because I did think it was about the whiz bang, which I didn't. Again, in your back,
you gotta be looking at with two sets of eyes simultaneously. But then you get to this ending, right? This final set piece, everything kind of like blows up. Brian gets outed. Dom realizes that he was following Letty. Then Brian reveals that Letty reached out to Brian.
Correct.
Which I guess happens before then Brian gives Letty Dom's whereabouts in Los Bandoleros.
Letty's death still doesn't make sense to me. I'm still not clear as to who actually killed her at this point.
No.
Almost killed her.
It's one of those things where when they bring her back,
in 6,
the teaser at the end of 5, right?
Yeah.
And I go like, well, yes, emotional logic, I want her back, but how do you explain this? I love that their explanation is like, I don't know, no one saw it and the people were lying. It is funny where I was like, but there's that whole death sequence. How are they going to explain that she's alive? And it's like, oh, right, the death sequence is Dom goes to a site and touches skid marks on the side of the road.
Yeah. He visualizes it. He manifests it. It's amazing.
9 p.m. CBS procedural powers.
It's amazing.
Like you can see the
always
crime.
protecting themselves.
It's incredible.
I mean, Han's death is another example of that too, obviously.
But
crazy.
This is another one where it's like,
I
bring Han back for one scene. It is really fan service to just tie him in and like go like, oh look, and now he's going to Tokyo. And that's just like, I don't know, audiences like Han so much. What if we just keep on putting off Tokyo Drift? Like, why the fuck not? Why does Han come back from the dead? Because no one wanted him dead in the first place. It was a mistake. They made it 6 movies ago. Yeah. You know, whatever. Who cares?
It's a mistake.
And like, once again, if you can emotionally justify it, which I think they do, why would Han not tell them that he had been alive this whole time? Because he had another family member to protect. Like, that's the whole thing. It works, right? But
steel trap.
Right. You have this end chase sequence that kind of sucks. It's like a letdown because it's just kind of plasticky. This is the one sequence that looks kind of direct to video to me, right? And just feels like it doesn't have spatial geography. At this point, I lose my investment in the world, whatever. Drive backwards, jumping, whatever. And then, right. And so when Brian and Dom have their flare up, you know, and the whole time it had been like, you give us Toretto, you give us Toretto. He goes in and finally feels like he has the leverage. I can bring you the guy. Toretto has to walk. I made you the deal. And he keeps on saying it to Toretto. And Toretto's like, okay, you put out milk and cookies for Santa Claus. Why would I you're still dumb enough to believe that they're never, ever, ever going to let me go, right? I'm like dirt to them.
Yeah.
They fundamentally view me as a different type of person. You don't get it. You're this pretty boy cop. You're choosing to be in these movies. I am not. I was born into this franchise, right? Like that's kind of the subtext of the whole thing. Mm-hmm. But the promise keeps on getting repeated. Final thing happens. They rush in. They handcuff Dom. No immunity. We made a deal. He's got to get processed, right? And you're sort of going like, wait, what? Did they break the movie? Like, how could you do this? This has already been going on for like...
Oh, it's beautiful.
Right. Because I remember at this point going like, what fucking ending does this have now? Because there can't be another 45 minutes resolving this. And if they're not going to take 40 minutes to resolve it, then why do the fake out? Like, what's going on here? And you fucking cut to courtroom, right? Everyone's testifying. You're like, what's going on? What are they doing? What's the plan here? And like, Dominic Toretto has fully redeemed himself in the eyes of the law, cooperation, this and that.
We don't give a shit.
Right, you have the judge give the movie speech and then go, that having been said, he's an unrepentant criminal. He's been doing fucking like years.
Thanks for help on this one thing.
What are you talking? I'm sorry. Too bad he's going to jail. And then you have this moment where fucking Vince stands up and starts screaming at him in the middle of the courtroom. Like, you fucking lied to me. You lied to me. I told you. And Mia's crying at this whole thing. And I, at this point, get scared where I'm like, is this what the fucking franchise is? Are they now setting up a 5th movie where once again, Brian has to earn his trust again? You know, like, I think I'm out in this moment. I think they've fucked it up beyond repair. And then you just have Dominic Toretto in the prison transport bus, right? And he's just fucking looking out the window, depressed as shit. Like,
he lost.
He's done. He got the rights back to Riddick. He wrestled back control of the Fast and Furious franchise, but for what? What was the point, right? And then it's so elegantly done, but it just the low in the mix. And you just see everyone else on the bus look out the window on the opposite side and all start like tapping each other. And they're tapping him and he's too depressed. He's not looking. He doesn't want to look at any of this shit, right? And he looks over and is it Brian first and then Mia?
It's Brian first, then
right.
Mia. Yeah.
Right. So he looks and right there is Brian in a fucking 10-second car. There on the other side is Mia in a 10-second car. She's driving too now. They are fucking together.
Had she never driven before this?
No, I don't
not
think
really.
so.
Yeah, not really.
Okay.
So it's like that feels like a huge move. The fact that they are fully unified means that like he stayed. He's really there for her. But beyond that, he's there for Dom. And in that one moment, non-verbally, the look exchange between the two of them is like, I told you you weren't going to fucking jail. I'm a man of my word. I am not going to betray you again. You better welcome me in with open arms because I'm a criminal for the rest of my fucking life. And that's what gets me emotionally, is that it's the whole fucking family thing. But it's this idea of just like, Brian wants to make it clear that like, it's real. It matters. He loves Dom. He loves Mia. He's here to stay. And if he has to spend the rest of his life on the lam to do so, then so fucking be it, because he made a promise. And just Dom recognizing what's about to happen and then smiling and cut to black. It's a perfect ending. Not only does it make you go, I'll see 28 of these movies. I'm here. I'm locked in. This thing is set, right? Even we're now at a point where Paul Walker's dead and Brian exists in a box for the rest of the movie off camera, you know, like Woody holding up Buzz Lightyear's arm next to the window. The purity of that moment, which can then be extended to any other character relationship, which is just, if a character in the family makes a promise to one another, that is unbreakable, right? That transcends everything else. That becomes the fucking code for the rest of these movies. But what I also love about it is, if this movie had flopped, if this movie had come out, open to like $15 million and done 45, and they went, well, yeah, we probably should have gone direct to video, it also works as a perfect ending.
It actually does work as an ending to the whole thing.
Look, 5, it starts up, they flip the bus over, they're off to the races. It's fucking fun as shit. But if they never made another Fast and Furious again, the arc is complete by the mere fact that Brian shows up.
I wish I could talk about this for another hour and a half, but I can't. Griffin, 2 hours. I don't know how long we've been doing this. This is the best. I got to roll. Keep talking to Phil. Thank you for doing this. I hope to see you again.
So obviously Fast and Furious number 1. I'm assuming, do you know what number 2 was in the box office? April 3rd, 2009, and infamously a huge flop. God, what can I say about this film that hasn't...
on this? So let's talk about how different my movie...
It is an animated film, so I'd be surprised if you haven't seen it.
Yeah.
It also sort of connects back, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, no, that's not it. Reese Witherspoon is the voice in this film.
Oh, is it Monsters vs. Aliens?
Monsters vs. Aliens.
Yeah, okay.
Which a $200 million animated film that basically made its money back.
The DreamWorks movies were so weird for a run there, because they would do like 5 of them a year. They were all successful, but they were all so expensive that they all lost money. Like he couldn't transcend to like the Pixar threshold where like adults are going to see it and it's making twice as much and it's now profitable.
Yes.
But also, the movie would come out and people would go like, okay, and he'd be like, cool, so I have 60 episodes of a TV show that premieres in a week. You all want to see this? Like they were just so front loaded with all of the spin-off material.
I also get Monsters and Aliens confused with Mars Needs Moms.
Yeah,
those feel like the same movie in my brain.
No, that's the one that's like the colossal flop.
Yeah.
That's the one that kicks Zemeckis off the Disney lot. Monsters vs. Aliens was notable for being, I believe, I'm not mistaken, the first DreamWorks 3D movie. Because Katzenberg was so early on the push for 3D, that was the first one. Then Avatar comes out later this year.
Yes, 2009, with Michelle Rodriguez. Yeah.
Right. And then the following spring, a year after this, How to Train Your Dragon comes out, and that's when Katzenberg's like, see, I told you, let's make every single movie 3D, and let's make the surcharge $5 instead of $1.50. And what a surprise, Jeffrey Katzenberg went too hard on a bad business idea and drove it into the ground prematurely. Yep.
The third place this weekend is a horror film. I don't know much about it. I believe it's part of a franchise. Okay. It's got a place in the title. It is God, I mean, I'm trying to think of who's in this movie, because I honestly don't know. Give me 1 minute here. Okay, it is Oh boy, Virginia Madsen's in this film. It's a Lionsgate franchise.
Is this if I have the wrong one, but I have the right franchise, tell me.
Yes, I'm sure you do.
Is this A Haunting in Connecticut?
It is Haunting in Connecticut.
Okay.
I
think that's the first one. Yeah.
I believe it's the first one.
Yeah.
The fourth film is it's a Nicolas Cage movie that I feel like a lot of people don't really like. It doesn't really exist. Yes, that's exactly what it
is. But weirdly a big hit. Like
it's a Proyas film, right? Alex Proyas.
It's a Proyas film. Yeah. Roger Ebert gave it like 4 stars, and it's like the only positive review it got. It's also like shot in Australia, so it has no other American actors in it. And at the time, it was like, that's weird. Why is Nicolas Cage in a movie with no one else? Yep. Like usually if a big star's in a movie, the supporting cast has people you recognize. But guess what? The second and third build people in that movie turned out to be Rose Byrne and Ben Mendelsohn. So we were all wrong.
It's also called Knowing. I mean, that's a terrible title. I mean, I don't know. I mean,
it's a bizarre fucking movie, but was a big hit. It was sort of the last pre-ironic Nicolas Cage hit.
Yes, that feels right. Number 5 is a comedy with 2 big names in comedy, 2 male actors. It's a buddy movie. I actually quite like this film, although I haven't seen it in a while, so it's hard to say. People think it's a Judd Apatow movie, but it's not.
Is it Blades of Glory?
No. It's
it's I Love You Man.
It is I Love You Man. Yes. Which I think is, I mean, I remember liking that film, but I don't know how it holds up.
I like that movie. I also would be curious about the rewatch. I mean, Rogan said this in an interview recently, but it's like, to some degree, if you're doing comedy correctly, it might not hold up well. Not because you want to be doing tasteless things, but because comedy tends to be so much more of the moment. Than any other genre, that's part of the fucking cost of doing business is like
that's true. I think this movie, I remember just thinking, is this going to be a giant gay panic joke? And it's not. Like it's actually got a lot more heart, and it's a lot smarter.
I think both of them are so good in it. I'm such a Rudd fan. That's sort of like the best kind of pure Rudd comedy, maybe. I mean, I love Wanderlust, but Wanderlust is so weird.
That's a really weird, which I rewatched. That movie is really weird, but I still really like it.
Yeah.
So in terms of Fast and Furious, just very quickly,
I just want to say quickly too, I guess it must have been in fewer theaters. I don't know if it was limited release or if and was still platforming, or if it had dropped off or whatever. But I was not planning on going to see this movie in theaters. I mean, maybe I would have gotten around to it eventually, probably after that trailer. But I went to the movies with a group of friends, and this was not our intent, and Adventureland was sold out. And then it was like, I don't know, Fast ampersand Furious. And I almost every Fast and Furious movie since then I have seen with at least one of those people I saw this movie with in theaters.
That's awesome.
Like, that's kind of the core group where we're checking in with each other. And some of us moved across the country and whatever. But it's like that's my Fast and Furious family.
I feel like this movie has a lot of influences in it, in the sense that like the fight, or sorry, the foot chase between Brian and the guy at the top of the movie.
Yeah, which I also think is a good sequence, but is very much the let's do our parkour.
Right? Like it's very Bourne. It's got that sort of influence to it. It's got a little heat in it. It feels like there's a little Michael Mann kind of component. I think obviously Fast 5 has some heat in it as well, maybe more so. Yeah. But I just feel like even just in the casting, you mentioned John Ortiz, who he's probably not right. And I get all the reasons why he's not right as a villain in this franchise, but I still think John Ortiz is really good in this movie.
I agree. I think he gives a very good performance, and I like that he comes back in 6. It's more that just like, if you're thinking bigger franchise, this is probably not the type of character
correct
you can compellingly build a movie around. When they do the twist in this movie that like, oh, it turns out he was the main guy, you just kind of go like, what? Who cares?
Yeah.
Fine.
They bring him back though. Is it in 6?
They bring him back in 6.
Yeah, I think it's 6. Yeah.
Yes. I think they maybe have more plans for him if Walker hadn't died.
Right.
Is what I heard. Yeah.
I feel like just while I have you, I feel like just the bench is deep when it comes to character actors that they have in this franchise. I mean, Shea Wiggum, who I always love Shea Wiggum. I wish he was in more things. He's great in this. His nose in Fast 9 is hilarious.
Unbelievable. Yeah.
I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
But then you brought up Gal Gadot earlier, and I feel like we didn't really talk about her much. I want to kind of ask you, do you think she comes back? Like, do you think that there's a world where she comes back in 10 or 11? Because, like, Wonder Woman 1984 didn't exactly set the world on fire. And I can't say that Gal Gadot has much of a career outside of Wonder Woman at this stage. Not to say that she can't, but she doesn't yet.
I think she's in a very interesting career position right now.
Yes.
And, you know, I think dollars to donuts, I think Wonder Woman 3 probably does happen, even if it was not very well liked. It was at least got enough attention. That character's too fucking big for them to not take another bite at the apple, and they so badly wanted to make sure they didn't get stuck waiting 8 years while Godot and Jenkins made other projects that they put those deals in place. But the other thing she has in the can right now, I don't know about. I like
Is this the Apple show? Or are you talking about the other thing?
There's a fucking Ryan Reynolds rock art heist movie, like global art heist movie, and then she's in the fucking Branagh Death on the Nile. Yes. Like all this, I'm just like, I don't know. And I think she has done some things in terms of her public reputation that have soured people on her in a couple different ways.
I agree.
Things that you almost would think like are contradictory. Oh, you hate this person because they seem aloof and disconnected and also politically wrong-headed? Like, she seems oblivious to the state of the world and also weirdly too invested at the same time. I
think it would do wonders for her career if she showed up in 10 or 11 of Fast and Furious. And I don't say that in a derogatory sense about her choices. I just mean like it would be a great like resurgence and a great like cool thing for her to do. But I don't know if she do it.
I agree. It makes me wonder. It also is one of those things where it's like, is that the happy ending we want for Han? Like,
right.
Look, Han's return was spoiled in the trailers and everything, right? And the trailers came out a fucking year ago because of the pandemic. So we all knew Han was back in this movie for a while.
Yes.
And yet seeing it in theaters the other night, the audience applauded when Han's photo came up on the screen. They applauded when he was revealed behind the gun. They applauded when he walked into the headquarters again. Like, he just is the character we all like the most. He really is in kind of an inexplicable way, and I think people want the best for him, and they're very happy that he's alive again. And it's nice that he's got his family with this young surrogate daughter character now. But
I don't know what that's about, but sure.
I don't know. But it's also like, here's the other thing with Han is like part of his character is his weird loner thing. To some degree, I think we could all shoulder she was the great love and he's the stalwart cowboy. And you know, he'll never get over her and he lives his life by his code, whatever. It's interesting because I do think probably 2 years ago they would have gone like, fuck, I can't believe we killed her off. She's Wonder Woman now. How do we get her back? And she would have said, absolutely not. And now we might be in the exact opposite position where, especially because Han's back, they're like, we might not need you anymore. You know?
But wouldn't you also say too, in 9, you've got a moment with Kurt Russell saying, you know, I worked with Giselle. I've faked deaths bigger than yours.
Sure. I also think there's a good chance they shoot. Giselle has a big set piece that takes place at a different point in the timeline. Right. There's a new sequence that fills in the gap somewhere.
Right.
But yes, look, anything is in bounds at this point. Truly.
So I one last thing, which is that at the end of this film, Brian is beaten up by Fennec and then from the ground holds onto his leg so that he is T-boned by Dom driving the car.
Correct.
I can't help but feel like that's a really kind of a metaphor for Brian in this series. Like, it just feels like he's the guy who's like, Dom's in a car, he's clearly the hero, and Brian is this kind of grounded, believable, he's like the real guy. if that makes sense.
Yes, and it's like he's the outsider. He's the one who doesn't belong in this world, right? He's the one who chose it.
Right.
Which is why we like him, because he does ultimately choose it. But the great Emily Vanderwerf did an amazing piece for Vox on the whole franchise and what the themes are and why people like it and all of it. It was like the best kind of comprehensive piece of the entire phenomenon I've read from anyone.
And a dialogue on the chronology that when you see it all laid out, you're like, my God, it makes no sense.
Incredible. And that's even without like being like Vandelleros, Turbocharged Prelude. Is Better Luck Tomorrow a prequel to...
Wait, is Better Luck Tomorrow actually connected to these movies? Because people say that it is. And
here's the thing. Sung Khan is Han in Better Luck Tomorrow.
Oh.
Han is a very mysterious character who speaks even less in Better Luck Tomorrow than he does in the other movies, right?
Incredible. Yeah, okay.
So, in an interview I read yesterday, Sung Kang was like, look, we did this movie together, then he got hired to make a big new movie, he brought me on, we thought it would be kind of funny if it was the same character, or at least we gave him the same name. We did not think this was going to turn into this big thing. We did not think we would be here 5 movies later, like yada, yada, yada. And whoever was interviewing him was like, so is it or isn't? And he's like, look, contractually, that movie's owned by Paramount. It's never officially going to be canon.
Right.
And if you ask me, like, nodding heavily intense air, I would say those two characters just share a spiritual bond and it's a fun in-joke.
Right.
But like, you can absolutely read that movie as a prequel. There's nothing, I think, that bumps on saying that's who Han was as a teenager.
That's amazing.
So in that case, you go like 1, 2, Bandoleros, 4, 5, 6, right? Yeah, 6. Then, Turbocharged Prelude. I'm sorry, between 1 and 2. No, because then Better Luck Tomorrow probably happens the same time as 1. Anyway, whatever.
It's crazy. It's crazy.
The thing that Vanderwerf said, which I think she put very well, is like he is us in these movies, right? Like Brian's the square. He's the normal guy, and the thing that Justin Lin I think recognizes the value of better than anyone is like what a good grounding element it is to have a shot of Brian being like, "Holy shit, Dom." Both the look on his face and that sort of delivery to be like, "This is crazy."
Yeah.
I think, as much as Mia doesn't have a lot of meat in 9, it is smart that Lynn recognizes that she probably is the person who needs to serve that function. And that 8 was a little untethered without having someone do that. And if you watch, I've seen 9 twice now. The second time I really paid attention to how much they use reaction shots of Mia over any other character, because she is now the person who shouldn't be here, quote unquote.
Right.
But that is Paul Walker's whole role, is like, being a little more in than you always think he's going to be. The joy comes from like, God, he is part of the team. He is game, but also sticking out a little bit, only kind of being assist and being the guy that we can kind of relate to the most readily.
Yeah. I mean, he also, you mentioned this up top in terms of quite frankly, his acting in the first film, right? Which is that he's pretty wooden, but he has this everyman quality to him to a certain extent. He's got,
like an
he's the audience
on screen.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my last question, two quick questions. The first is, and I'm trying to sort of ask this delicately, but do you think that Paul Walker's death is part of what kind of puts the mythos of this franchise in a different light? And I think about, Dark Knight, which I think is a brilliant film, and I'm sure everybody would have loved it had Heath Ledger lived, but his death kind of elevated it into this sort of next level. Right? Like, does Dark Knight get Oscars? Does it get considered for these things without Heath's death?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to say that Universal did anything to try to, monetize Paul Walker's death. I'm speaking more to just like
the fucking poster was the two of them looking in Ariel with a tagline, "One last ride." I mean, like, but I look, that often backfires.
Yes.
It was dicey of them to do that.
Yep.
And it fucking worked, not just commercially. It's not only, far and away the highest grossing film in the series, but I think creatively they threaded that needle like perfectly.
Yes.
It's another ending that I just cannot fucking believe they pulled off.
I agree.
It defies all logic. I think it is truly the best any movie has ever handled an actor dying.
Yep, I agree.
In a way where you do not think that this would be the franchise that's equipped to deal with that. And it somehow, once again, threads this needle where it is both giving you an emotionally satisfying answer to what this franchise is doing with this character in the future, while also eulogizing the actor.
Yeah.
Which should not work. I mean, they like just rip down the fourth wall and tell you that they're doing it, you know? And every
the effects
character
are
on screen, incredible, but they also, I think, are smart about stylizing it a little bit. So when he like shows up, he looks like a fucking angel.
He does.
You know, like they give him that glow where it's like, you know, this is unreal. You know, this is unnatural. And Dom is crying in a way he wouldn't be crying if he's just saying, hey, you should stay at home. Like that, there are those logic gaps in it that don't make sense that you buy because the emotional reality of it is right and it's what you want to see and it's what you want to hear. I do think the fact that they pulled that off gives this franchise, like, puts it on sort of a legendary tier. Yeah. I think when 8 was a dip and Hobbs and Shaw felt like a dip as well, people were like, well, the mistake they made was not leaving well enough alone and not just ending it with 7. And I think 9 has made it clear, like, they know how to pull off a better ending for this entire thing. That they would not have been able to ram onto the end of 7 just because Walker died. You know, there was more to resolve there. I do think that totally elevates it. And I think to a certain degree, it's like the Dark Knight question is one thing, but the other bigger question is, I feel like we'll all never be able to stop wondering what the third Dark Knight movie had been if Heath Ledger hadn't died.
Right.
And you always hear contradictory things of like how much the Joker was or wasn't supposed to be in it, but it's so clear that like fundamentally that's not the movie he would have made had the guy not died. Right. And Black Panther 2 is going to be another interesting situation like that, you know? Where it's like, if anything, the legacy of, oh my God, and then the guy died solidifies that movie in amber, but also if you're able to like keep it going after that and not make it feel ghoulish, then you go like, well, now you're just like playing with house money. Like, how did you fucking do this? You know?
Yes.
So I think that puts it on another tier.
I think I agree with everything you're saying. I think that you know, when I was watching these films, I knew that he died while making 7. I didn't know how much of 7 had been shot. So I watched the end of that film and I was floored by how graceful and how beautiful it was for a series that is not known.
No, you sit there the entire time and like, you know, when I went to go see it in theaters, and I went to my friend Pilot Virouette invited me to a screening, so I saw it a couple weeks early, largely because I was so fucking worried about having it spoiled for me that I just like set out the red alarm to all my critic friends to be like, please, I don't want to hear like a whisper. I was so fucking tense about how they were going to handle the Paul Walker situation, and you sit there the entire time and you go like, as you said, like how much of this did they shoot before he died? Like, how much footage can they possibly have left? At what point do they just have to kill him off on screen because there's nothing left? And I think you sit there the entire time going, like, they're gonna kill him and it's gonna suck. It's gonna be bad. It's gonna be like a body double for Carrie Fisher in a scene that doesn't really make any sense, right? And they used the footage they had so well.
Yes.
They were really smart about the CGI pieces they needed to make things cohesive around the footage they had of him. There aren't really any scenes that are like whole cloth CGI Paul Walker. It's really just like, oh, you need him in the background of a shot to explain why he's not there. But any sequence where he's really active is like shit that he shot stitched together with maybe some of the second unit stuff they didn't have or whatever. So when you get to that point where he survives and you're like, fuck, he made it through the whole movie. They shot the scene where he calls Mia and like says, I might not make it back, which is like the best acting he's ever done in the franchise. Like, you're like, fuck, they had all of this? That's like incredible. So then when you get to the beach, you're just like, I don't know how.
Like, it's really, I mean, and it should also be said too, like James Wan, who I'm not a horror guy, so I have not seen the Conjuring films. Quite liked all the sea crime of Aquaman, obviously.
Sure.
Who doesn't? But I just didn't really know what to expect. And I'm watching Seven. There's a visual style that James Wan brought that I really appreciated. It was a lot of fun to watch. It was an exciting, cool.
He's a little cartoonier, but I think in a
bit,
good way. Yeah.
But then to be handed this movie, and then to be handed this tragedy, and then to have to, to land that plane.
Yeah.
I mean, incredible stuff that he pulled it off. I mean, truly.
It's truly stunning king shit.
Yes, it's crazy.
And once again, like, look, I've spent the last couple of years really questioning myself and going like, I really believed they could keep this franchise going. Was that wrong? Are they going to make 4 more of these movies to diminishing returns, and it's going to be a ghoulish husk of what it was before? Yep. And I think Lin, much like when he came in for Ampersand and looked at all the pieces on the board and said, like, I know what to build with this, and knew how to build beyond that for 5. I think he was able to like look at all the pieces in the board from 7, 8, and Hobbs and Shaw and go like, I know how to make this mean something again.
So my last question is sort of a dual-pronged question. I've heard some rumors that that there are some Fast and Furious television shows that are going to be put into development, perhaps for Peacock or something along those lines.
There's the Netflix animated series Fast and Furious Spy Racers, which is weird. That's all
I'm shocked. So my question is this: we're gonna get these 3 films, and that'll be the end of the OG cast and the franchise. Undoubtedly, there'll be spin-offs and more, maybe Hobbs and Shaw's movies or whatever the case might be. And now this potential television shows. Do you think, like, one of the reasons that I think that this series has been so successful, why this fan base is so perhaps lacking in toxicity, is that the mythology that it exists in is pretty grounded, and it's not that deep. And I don't say that in a shitty way.
No, but it's contained.
Right?
Yes.
So this idea of trying to do television shows where I'm just like, I don't think you maybe understand what people love about this franchise.
I would agree. Similarly, there's been the rumor circulating that Universal wants to find a way to combine Jurassic Park and Fast and Furious. Who knows how that's serious that is? I'm sure someone's pitched it,
For sure.
All of that stuff makes me think that they don't fucking understand this thing. Yeah, right. Look, all of that has worried me. The relief I have right now is that it seems like wisely they are fast tracking, no pun intended, getting 10-1 and 10-2 done before all else. Like, even the fact that those 2 movies are happening before a Hobbs and Shaw 2, before this all lady spinoff that they've talked about, or this prequel or whatever. I'm just like it's Star Wars, right? If you can resolve the Toretto family saga, right? Or let's just say, because it might go generationally, if you can resolve Dominic Toretto saga, right? Then I'm just like, at that point, if you want to make any other fucking movies with the name of the thing on them and whatever tenuous connection, I kind of, fine.
Right.
Like, God go with you, right? Like, maybe not for me, maybe I'll enjoy them. Who knows?
Okay.
Hobbs and Shaw irks me because it feels like it is doing shit that potentially disrupts the stuff that's already going on the other timeline. If Vin's gotten to end this thing the way he wants to, and Lin's gotten to end this thing the way they want to, whatever they do past that point, I'm pretty okay with, And I feel like best case scenario, it's like fucking Mandalorian, and they find weird pockets and weird, like, what if this type of character was in this type of universe, and this does tie in, but this stuff is new and whatever. And like, worst case scenario, it's this fucking Netflix cartoon show that's super weird. That is, it's like a bad version of G.I. Joe, a Real American Hero.
Well, it's funny because I just watched, and this will make sense in a second. I just watched the first Terminator the other day for the first time in a long time, and the second one as well. And the Terminator series is another series similar to this one, where I think they thought there was more gas in the tank, forgive the pun, than there actually was. And I'm not convinced that. And listen, maybe Vin's got plans, and I'm not suggesting that he doesn't, that could extend outside of the films that he's in. I'm sure he's got some more books with locks, perhaps, of things that they might have to pay for or what have you. I guess my question to you is more, do you think that this mythology has the flexibility that perhaps Universal does? Because if Okay.
I don't.
Because Hobbs and Shaw seems to prove otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. I don't. Maybe they'll prove me wrong, and I think if they prove me wrong, it probably will be by doing something different that I hadn't even thought of.
Right.
By thinking non-literally about what a Fast and Furious movie could be, and making something that perhaps is not what I love about Fast and Furious, but is entertaining or valid in some kind of way. Totally. And the reason I give them that benefit of the doubt is because look at fucking Tokyo Drift, right? Which on paper was just like, what is this? Neither of the two guys are in it. This is fucking nothing.
Right.
And it's ended up being not only like beloved, as on its own as an entry, but being this like important cornerstone of the whole thing. Where I'm like, who's to say they couldn't do that tomorrow? The reason I doubt it is I think now there's too much pressure on it. And as we've been talking about sort of the weird organic nature that this whole thing developed out of nowhere, I don't know if you can generate it again in a lab. I don't know if you can go, oh, we just want to make a little one, it's Tokyo Drift, and not overthink it, or not say we have to burden it with 8,000 connections and it has to fill in this gap. I mean, it's another one of these things where I think they'll go like, oh, fans love when the things tie back in, but do it the wrong way. They'll answer the wrong questions. They'll bring back the wrong characters. Like, that's my most cynical belief. But if Vin and Lin get to do 10, 11.
10-1 and 10-2.
Right. Before then it's like, fine. Because to some degree, I feel like that's weirdly the nature of all of this franchise shit these days is just like, you can't be precious about it. You can't be precious about it as a fan, and you can't be precious about it as a creator, because IP is just like too fucking valuable for them, and they view it as IP now. That's the term they've come up with to devalue it as storytelling, to just treat it like a product, and they go, why would we stop selling Coca-Cola? That's our key IP, Yeah. So for me, it's like, my thing is just, I only get protective of, like, I would love to see the people I love get to do the thing that they wanted to do on their terms and not have that interfered with. And if they feel like they got to say what they had to say, then anyone else can do whatever the fuck they want with it. Because, like, unlike Star Wars fans who start petitions to say that, like, The Last Jedi should be removed from canon, it's like, if you don't like a movie, then you just don't watch it. It doesn't exist. Like, whatever,
Yep.
And over time, like, you might come to respect certain elements of it. It's fine. I understand that, like, Last Jedi is more sensitive to people because it's playing with these pieces that have this deep history than something like Rogue One, where you're setting up new characters and whatever. So that's my thing. It's like, if they want to make shit like Rogue One, make shit like Rogue One,
I totally agree. And I would also say too, and you mentioned this at the very beginning of the episode, and it's worth saying again, that good art evolves with you, right?
Yeah,
You're a changing, evolving individual, and a movie that you might have liked 10 years ago, you might not like today, and vice versa. I mean, I think that that's an incredibly important thing for fandom. I've been thinking a lot about fandom lately and why things mean so much to me, and why it's so important that everyone like it along with me. And it's just what it is when they don't. But this series has been a really interesting example of an evolving creature that you kind of jump on board at certain times. And it just,
especially like a fandom that does not derive from nerd culture, like I say, we're like two nerdy white guys who like love pop culture and have gone into this fucking career because of this. And we're living in this weird climate where it's like, oh, is this like a real monkey paw culture that we found ourselves in, where everything I thought I wanted is now like horrible? But there's something to the fact that like Fast and Furious was not driven by that kind of thing, that it really is this kind of like franchise of the people, and just to wrap this up, not that I want to fucking bag on it, but like, here's a distinction for me. The Netflix show, which I have not watched the entirety of, right? I've watched most of the first season. I'm probably going to finish all of it now. When I heard like, oh, DreamWorks is doing a Netflix Fast and Furious cartoon show, I went, fucking great. Like, what I want to see is the like 1980s action movie adaptation for Saturday morning TV. I want to see RoboCop the animated series, or G.I. Joe is like what I want to see, right? Where, especially because at the point that this was put in production, Walker had died. And I was like, oh, you could do an animated series in which Brian is still alive. It's not morbid. You can have the whole cast there. You can give them crazy technology. You can go to space. You can have them be alpha commandos or whatever, right? Like, I was like, just do that. Like, have a fun cartoon show for kids where you can just no rules apply anymore. Mm-hmm. It's just kind of gonzo, bright colored candy, like bullshit. In a good way. I say that in an endearing way.
Of course.
And what I don't like about the cartoon show is it is about Dom's nephew or cousin and his own parallel team of like super skilled teenagers who get recruited by a different government agency, and there's like a female Mr. Nobody analog, and they're being sent out for missions or whatever. And I'm just like, I really don't care about this if my family isn't in this, you know?
Yes.
Like this same milieu, the same style, aesthetic, even tone of cartoon show. It's not a masterpiece, but I would be with it if the characters on screen were goofy cartoon versions of Roman and Tej and Letty and Dom. And that's what makes me wonder how much success they'll have expanding out beyond that family. Because watching that, I'm like, I would go for this tonal exercise, this change in audience, this change in format to half-hour kids animation if it was still my characters. And these new characters, I just frankly don't give a shit about.
Well, I thank you so much for being here, Griffin.
My pleasure.
I know you have all sorts of recuperating to do, so I appreciate you taking all the time to talk.
Right back into bed, but this was healing.
And we hope to have you back to talk about tie-in movie toys from
long
1999 at some point.
Promise, but we're going to
whenever. There's absolutely, obviously, no pressure. But thank you for taking the time. I know that it's been a lot for you over the past little bit, so I really do appreciate it.
Look, thank you. This was once again. Self-care, really, to talk about this much, and I'm just so thankful that as much as I'm now thankfully on the other end of a couple months of scary health shit, that the Fast and Furious franchise was able to get me through it. It was very good timing.
Yes. Well, and I'm also glad that the movie was good, because I was fearful of
Phil,
frankly your emotional state if it was not.
I would have lost my fucking mind. I had nothing going for me. I was at such a rock bottom. If this movie were bad, I was going to really bottom out.
Well, then everyone wins. And we win for having you back on to talk about this. So thank you so much, Griffin.
Podcast like it's 1999. Podcast like it. You want a podcast like it's 1999.